5:39, 9 o'clock was also known as man's meditation. Especially for qi cultivators, man's meditation was the most important time for cultivation. It was the best time to calm down and concentrate. Because Chen Pinggan needed to catch the ferry that would depart at midnight, he had to temporarily give up his peaceful state of mind and withdraw his mind from the small world of the human body. He no longer continued to squat on the mountain top to watch the scene of the sword qi knocking on the pass. He got up and prepared to hurry. However, the owner of the tea house had already walked over with a celadon teapot in her hand. She was standing outside the pavilion. Chen Pinggan walked over quickly. The female cultivator from the sparrow house bowed and handed him the celadon teapot. She smiled and said, "Immortal Master Chen, this is the small shen wall that we picked this year. It's just a small gift." Chen Pinggan took the celadon teapot and asked, "Is there any small shen wall left in the tea house? I want to buy some." The female cultivator shook her head and said apologetically, "There are only a few old tea trees in the back mountain of the sparrow house. Most of them have been reserved. The tea house only has a limited supply and there are not many left." Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "Then I'll take the teapot for free." The female cultivator nodded and smiled without saying anything. Chen Pinggan asked, "Is there any autumn landscape bulletin in the Peach Blossom Crossing that I can buy? I've missed a lot of them on my way here from the Lu Ying Kingdom." The female cultivator said, "There are some in the tea house. Immortal Master Chen, you don't have to pay for them. It's meaningless for us to keep them." Chen Pinggan lifted the teapot and said helplessly, "It's not good to drink tea with Senior Wu. Take a bottle of small shen wall, and ask for a few more landscape bulletin for free." The female cultivator smiled and said, "It's just right." Chen Pinggan said helplessly, "You're right. Trivial favors were also real favors." In his memory, Sun Jiashu in Old Dragon City, the female cultivator in Qing Fu Fang who hid her identity and the female cultivator in front of him were all good at these things. He just had to remember them. On the road of life, there were too many sceneries to look at left and right. There was no harm in not forgetting them as you walked. The female cultivator asked Chen Pinggan to wait for a moment and went to get 3 copies of the Immortal Bulletin to give to the distinguished guest. After Chen Pinggan left the tea house, he began to read the court bulletin as he walked. The reason for Wu Jiong's hospitality was simple. Fuchu country was right next to him. If he and Qi Jinglong performed the sword ritual one after the other, it would cause too much of a commotion. The North Continent's landscape bulletin, which seemed to have no scruples, had another unwritten rule. When a sword immortal died in battle at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the news would quickly spread back to the North Continent. The landscape bulletin would not record anyone's sword sacrifice. Qi Jinglong had given a clear reason, because this was not something that could be used as a pastime. Every custom in the world has its own logic. Over at the tea shop's waterside pavilion, the patriarch of discipline, Wu Jiong, was sitting in his original position. However, the person opposite him had already left. Wu Jiong had no intention of drinking tea. He just sat there quietly, admiring the lake water under the moonlight. The female cultivator stood outside the stairs of the waterside pavilion. Wu Jiong asked, "Is there not a single mountain head who knows about the happenings in the capital of Daejuan and wrote it in the Shanshui Imperial Gazette?" The female cultivator shook her head and said, "It seems that the emperor of Daejuan Lu had given a strict order not to leak any information." At that time, there were only a few people watching the battle at the city wall and the Yushi River. The saint of the academy was there personally, so no earth immortals dared to spy on the battle. Even if they used the divine power of mountain view to observe from afar, they did not dare to do so. Wu Jiong smiled and said, "That saint has a bad temper." However, after he intervened twice, the situation in the central part of the North Continent has become much more peaceful. The female cultivator asked curiously, "Grandmaster Wu, why didn't you just give Mr. Chen a high-quality Dharma robe?" Wu Jiong gestured for the junior to take a seat. After she sat down, Wu Jiong smiled and said, "Give him what he likes. If he values etiquette, then let's follow the rules and talk about etiquette. If he is greedy and lustful, then we need to do something else." The female cultivator said carefully, "It's just a small jar of dark wall. When Immortal Master Chen accepted it, He was really happy. Wu Jiong glanced at the smart junior who was helping the mountain head greet and send people off. Being the manager of the tea house in the Sparrow Manor, she must have a good heart. However, since she was in this position, it meant that her future in cultivation was bleak. She was in the same awkward position as most of the ferry managers in the world. Wu Jiong did not want to say more. Cultivators had to be mindful of things. Talking about these matters that involved the fundamentals of cultivation with this junior of the sect would be very heart-wrenching. In any case, the other party's way of dealing with people could be said to be watertight, and he never did anything superfluous. That was enough. Wu Jiong sighed. He wondered if his mansion master had met that land dragon. There were too many stories about Liu Jinglong, who was not a carnate sword embryo from the Taihui sword sect. However, many of the rumors were too far away from a third-rate immortal force like the Sparrow Manor in the North Continent. However, because the Manor Lord had traveled through mountains and rivers with Liu Jinglong in her early years, and she had never concealed her admiration for this Mr. Liu, she openly asked everyone about love and romance. She had even asked for advice from Wu Jiong. Therefore, the female cultivators of the Sparrow Manor were filled with curiosity and longing for this Mr. Liu. Generally speaking, women admired the elegance of sword immortals, while men yearned for fairies. Therefore, Wu Jiong was actually very curious about how those immortal couples on the mountain could be united. If disaster befell them, would they really be able to live and die together? Wu Jiong did not know. She also hoped that she would never know about it and cultivate in peace. Unfortunately, Wu Jiong knew that she was not talented enough. She could only wait for death. Thinking of this, Wu Jiong asked the manager of the tea house to bring 2 jars of wine. The female cultivator was about to hide it. Wu Jiong smiled and said, "What's wrong with drinking in the tea house? Besides, I'm the ancestral master of the Sparrow Manor. Who dares to stop me?" Only then did the female cultivator stand up. Her footsteps became lighter as she went to get the wine. Even the ancestral master Wu Jiong was like this. She was just a cave-dwelling realm cultivator with no hope of achieving the great Tao. She could only guard this tea house for years. How could she not secretly drown her sorrows in wine? A colorful rainbow light descended from the sky and landed on the lake. She flew into the pavilion. She was extremely beautiful. She sat opposite Wu Jiong and said in a muffled voice, "Drinking is good. Count me in." Wu Jiong smiled and said, "Not very good. That Mr. Liu, or the blockhead that the manor head mentioned." The person opposite Wu Jiong was the earth fairy cultivator of the young manor head of the Sparrow Manor. She was the famous female cultivator Sun Qing. According to seniority, she was lower than Wu Jiong. Sun Qing shook her head. "Mr. Liu has changed a lot. When we met this time, he said some straightforward things to me. I understand that Mr. Liu is doing it for my own good, but I still feel a little unhappy." Wu Jiong was puzzled. What did he say? The young manor head waved her hand and said, "Let's not talk about this. It's a little embarrassing." Wu Jiong was speechless. "You're already blocking the way, and you're still talking about being embarrassed." However, Wu Jiong was really puzzled. Although his manor head was not considered a heavenly favored one, he had reached the Aurus core bottleneck in less than 100 years. He was also one of the 10 fairies of the North Continent. To put it bluntly, no one would find it strange if an upper 5 realms sword immortal took the initiative to ask to become immortal Tao companions with this promising manor head. But then again, if this was a utilitarian calculation, to be fair, his manor head really could not compare to the water classic mountain fairy Lu Sui. Not only was she in the 10 fairies of the North Continent with Liu Jinglong, but she was also more beautiful than Sun Qing. Wu Jiong asked softly, "Have you completely given up on Mr. Liu?" Sun Qing laughed loudly and said, "How can that be? I like him even more." Wu Jiong facepalmed and was speechless. Why was Mr. Liu, who loved to reason the most, so unreasonable? The 3 of them drank together. The female cultivator in charge was still a little reserved. However, when the 3 female cultivators of the same sect, whose seniority and status differed greatly, deliberately gave up on the abhijna of cultivators, they would get drunk and their faces would become as beautiful as peach blossoms. In the end, the 3 of them were just women. When a woman spoke dirty words, it was true that nothing was taboo. She had a unique charm that was especially moving. The adult and the child rode the wind north to the Taihui sword sect. As Qi Jinglong had to take care of the new disciple, Whitehead, whose cultivation level was not high, he did not travel quickly. Then, he bumped into the manor head of Sparrow Manor, Sun Qing, on the way. Qi Jinglong was now quite confident. It was nothing more than applying what he had learned and talking to Fairy Sun step by step. The extremely beautiful Sun Qing did not act strangely from the beginning to the end. However, when she left and her graceful figure disappeared, the white-haired young man shook his head and clicked his tongue. Surnamed Liu, such a beautiful fairy sister actually likes you. You must be blind. If I remember correctly, Manor Head Sun is one of the 10 fairies of the North Continent. Mr. Liu, it's not that I want to criticize you, but so what if you don't become Dao companions? I think that Sun Qing will still agree to you. How can you bear to reject such a good thing? Qi Jinglong, who was somewhat relieved, continued to ride the wind north with the youth beside him. He said with a smile, reasoning with you, especially about the love between a man and a woman, is like playing the lute to a cow. Whitehead said angrily, then why did you take me in as your disciple? Why didn't you let me return to Deer Mountain? Qi Jinglong said slowly, compared to the North Continent having another sword cultivator who kills for money, I would still prefer to see a young sword immortal who has truly achieved the Dao. Qi Jinglong said again, don't worry. After entering the Taihui sword sect and being registered in the ancestral hall, you don't have to call yourself a disciple of the Taihui sword sect when you go down the mountain in the future, and you don't have to admit that you are my disciple. Within the rules, you just have to attack the sect, and I will not deliberately restrict your temperament. However, you must be clear about the rules of the sect and me. I don't want you to say that you don't know the rules when I punish you in the future. Whitehead was sullen. The youth did not even want to understand half of the rules of the Taihui sword sect and Liu. It must be boring, pedantic, rigid, and extremely boring. What kind of immortal master was he to be? What kind of sword immortal was he to be? How could it be as satisfying as being an assassin of Deer Mountain? The people of the Jianghu also cared about heroism and gratification. The assassins of Deer Mountain did not care about these. After receiving money, they killed for others. They were responsible for their own life and death. That was true freedom. Qi Jinglong was silent for a moment. He said softly, whether you listen or not, I have to tell you. As long as you follow the rules, no matter who you attack in the future, whether you lose or get beaten up, you just have to tell me when you come back to my side. I will reason with them for you until they are completely reasonable. Whitehead crossed his arms. Don't give me that. How can a genius like me lose to others after practicing the sword? All right, I can't beat a sword immortal for the time being. However, for people of the same age, if you ask them to jump in front of me, I will casually cut them into pieces. After you really practice the sword, you won't have much strength to talk big. Qi Jinglong said with a smile, as for not needing my help to reason, you can attack by yourself. Of course, it's better. Whitehead's face was full of disapproval. However, he caught a glimpse of Liu's side profile from the corner of his eyes. The youth's state of mind was still a little strange. Like a child in ragged clothes in the difficult winter when he was young, basking in the warm sun that could not be seen or touched. However, this feeling disappeared in a flash. Whitehead suddenly shouted, if I memorize the rules of the Taihui sword sect's ancestral hall, you will allow me to drink. How about that? Qi Jinglong shook his head. No money. Whitehead said angrily, if you have no money in your pocket, don't you know you have to pay on credit with that Chen Haoren? Qi Jinglong thought for a moment. I'm afraid of being persuaded to drink. It's not worth it. The money for the pot of wine was borrowed from Jiyu Mo of the Taixia lineage. Every time Qi Jinglong left the sect to travel, he did not bring any money or other things. Eating clouds and drinking dew, the essence of the sun and moon, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, these were the 5 grains of cultivators. As the sword cultivator with the greatest killing power in the world, he did not need any robes or any offensive treasures. When he borrowed money from her, luckily he did not blurt it out. Otherwise, it would be even more troublesome. Qi Jinglong originally wanted to say that he would return the money when he passed by Taisha Mountain. However, in a flash, he understood that if he said such words, she would definitely misunderstand that he had bad intentions and wanted to use the opportunity to get close to her Jiu Mo. He might as well not say it and just remember it in his heart. After Qi Jinglong thought about it, he increasingly felt that he could be considered to have comprehended the side path by analogy. Once he opened one orifice, he would be able to open all the other orifices. Whitehead asked, surnamed Liu, "Is there a particularly beautiful girl in your Taihui sword sect?" "Yen, a pretty girl around my age." Qi Jinglong asked doubtfully, "What's wrong?" Whitehead sighed. "They are really pitiful to meet me. They are destined to be obsessed with a man who will not like them." Qi Jinglong smiled and said, "Who taught you these words?" Whitehead said firmly, "That guy who calls himself Chen Haoran." Qi Jinglong shook his head, and then he was a little uncertain. In order to persuade people to drink, that guy would do anything. He could really put a lot of luck into a wine pot and drink it all in one gulp. So he asked, "Did he really tell you that?" Whitehead began to exaggerate. Qi Jinglong smiled. It seemed like it was not. Whitehead was a little puzzled. How did Liu know that it was not that guy who taught him? Qi Jinglong looked into the distance. "Come with me to see the two gentlemen later. Remember to speak less and listen more." Whitehead slapped his head. Now that he heard the word gentleman, he felt a headache. Above a golden sea of clouds, two cultivators stood side by side. One of them was a middle-aged man with a slender figure. He wore a scholarly robe and had a jade token at his waist. The other was an old cultivator with a hunched back and a long sword on his back. The former was the sage of the academy, and he was the most famous one in the North Continent. His name was Ju Mi, and he came from the Central Divine Continent's Li Ji Academy. It was said that the academy's Grand Chancellor gave this disciple the word anger control. It was also this person who, after leaving the academy, still beat up the two big cultivators who did not know what to do. He shouted angrily, "Did you pass?" What else could the two big cultivators do? They could only try to convince him. In the end, they were beaten up again and said, "What *T did you pass?" But of course, Qi Jinglong knew that the sage of the academy was very knowledgeable. Not only was he specialized in his field, but he was also proficient in Buddhism. He was once praised by someone as rigorous in his knowledge, impenetrable, gentle, kind, respectful, and prudent, a pillar of the academy. In fact, if there were only 12 words in the 16-word evaluation, no one would question it. Unfortunately, because of the 4 words gentle, kind, and prudent, this scholar of the Li Ji Academy was controversial. Think about it, a disciple of the academy who was about to rush to another continent to be the sage of the academy was given the word anger control by his own teacher. Was it really related to gentle, kind, and prudent? But Ju Mi himself was the most proud of those 4 words. But he never admitted the other 12 words. The other old cultivator with the sword on his back was called Dong Zhu. He was a sword cultivator who had fallen in the Jade Realm. He was a big cultivator who had ascended to the immortal realm but did not establish a sect. He had always considered himself as a mountain cultivator. For more than 100 years, he had been seriously injured and needed to recuperate in his own mountain. Otherwise, he would suffer every time he went out, which was why he did not travel to the inverted mountain. There was a rumor that sword immortal Dong Zhu was actually the disciple of the young rogue cultivator, Huang Shi. However, both parties never said anything about it, allowing the outside world to speculate. As Huang Shi was not a sword cultivator, most of the mountains thought that it was nonsense. During the battle between Qi Jinglong and Huang Shi, he also thought so. But after the real fight, Qi Jinglong was not sure. This was because Huang Shi was indeed a sword cultivator and possessed 2 intrinsic flying swords. Huang Shi was willing to reveal his identity as a sword cultivator and not escape directly because his opponent was called Liu Jinglong. In fact, for so many years, Qi Jinglong had never mentioned it to anyone. Qi Jinglong brought the young man and landed in front of the 2 seniors. Qi Jinglong bowed to both sides. Dong Zhu did not think much of it. A good young sword cultivator who had a chance to reach the top of a continent. Why did he have to learn to be a scholar? He really did not like it. If the academy had not discovered Qi Jinglong's whereabouts and wanted to talk, Dongzhu would not have bothered to talk nonsense with this land dragon. If they really wanted to talk, he would wait until Qi Jinglong broke through the realm and ascended to the pure jade realm. Then, he, Dongzhu, would go to the Taihui sword sect to ask. The white-haired youth hated these complicated formalities and messy politeness the most. The young man simply hid behind Qi Jinglong and acted like a wooden man. You don't know me and I don't know you. Why are you being so polite? Qi Jinglong did not deliberately force the young man. Everything would wait until they reached the Taihui sword sect. The saint of the academy was Zhu Mi. At first glance, he was actually an ordinary scholar with an elegant appearance. Zhu Mi said straightforwardly, now that the two sword celestials of the Taihui sword sect are not on the mountain and you are about to break through the realm, when the three of them fight, do you need me to help you hold the line? In case someone uses this custom to deliberately suppress you and the Taihui sword sect. Qi Jinglong bowed again and stood up with a smile. There's no need for Mountain Lord Zhu to hold the line. 3 swords it is. Even if there are senior sword celestials with selfish motives, I can't block them. I won't complain. Zhu Mi turned his head and smiled. Old Dong, how about it? Dongzhu bared his teeth and said, all right, count me in. Together with Li Cai of the floating duckweed sword lake, the last one is the most dangerous. Dongzhu said to the young man in green, don't thank me. I'm asking the sword. I won't lose weight. Kid, don't cry for your father and mother when the time comes. I don't have an illegitimate child outside. Qi Jinglong nodded and said, it's better to accept. Then I won't thank you. Zhu Mi smiled knowingly. Dongzhu reached out and rubbed his chin. Why are you so annoying? Qi Jinglong smiled and said, Senior, let me break through first. The young man who pricked up his ears hid behind Qi Jinglong and muttered in his heart, cut him, cut him, cut him. Don't waste time. Cut Liu and I'll run away. Zhu Mi smiled and said, why did you take in such a disciple? Qi Jinglong said, his heart isn't bad, but he's hard to teach. He needs to be taught well. Zhu Mi nodded. That's not bad. The white-haired old man sighed. Dongzhu also felt bored. Actually, with the old and the young together, it would probably be easy to talk. Zhu Mi said, Qi Jinglong, I came to see you this time to hold the line. Since you don't need it, I can save some effort. Qi Jinglong hesitated and asked, Mountain Lord Zhu, can I ask about the result? Zhu Mi smiled and said, Kid, you also care about this. Why, do you have some relationship with those two? Qi Jinglong thought of the guy who took 3 punches from Jiu and smiled. Somewhat. Zhu Mi said, let's talk as we walk. I'll tell you some of my reading experience and make old Dong feel disgusted. It's not a wasted trip. Dongzhu was helpless. Zhu Mi's bad temper was to Dongzhu's taste. He asked for it. Dongzhu didn't want to talk about knowledge with these 2 guys who read a lot. He squinted at the young man. The young man squinted at him. Dongzhu stared and said, hey, kid, haven't you heard of the great sword Immortal Dong? The young man stared and said, so what if I know? I have a father, mother, and ancestors. I'm not related to you. Dongzhu clicked his tongue and said, little bastard, you're quite bold. The white-haired old man raised his eyebrows. When I reach the upper 5 realms, if you have the ability, come and try it. Then you'll know who's the bold one. Dongzhu slapped the young man's head, and the latter fell to the ground. He laughed and said, don't you know that when you say these words, you're still wearing open-crotch pants? You're learning from those old playboys and saying that you're in love. Who taught you that? Your master, Liu Jinglong. The white-haired old man stood up, but he didn't shout at the old man. He wasn't an idiot who had water in his head. A real man knows when to stand tall. The white-haired old man snorted and said, the one surnamed Liu is not my master. I only have one master in my life, but I still have a drinking friend who hasn't been recognized by me. His name is Chen Haoren. If you have the ability, go find him. What kind of senior are you bullying me? He can make you cry for your parents and run away with one sword. Qi Jinglong turned his head and frowned. The white-haired old man. The young man immediately said in a sickly voice, "Well, Chen Haoran is not as good as senior for now." On the ferry, Chen Pingan had already put away the mountain and river court bulletin. He didn't find the result he wanted to know. The latest court bulletin didn't mention anything about the situation in the capital city of Great Seal Country. In the battle between Guu and Gu, the sword immortal of Apetoot Mountain, it was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Qi Jinglong had mentioned this before, saying that Guu had always been cautious in his actions. He definitely wouldn't do it purely because of personal feelings, and wouldn't just go to Jade Seal River to throw his life away and wash Gu's sword. Chen Pingan stood at the railing of the ferry's bow and flipped through several mountain and river court bulletins. It wasn't that he didn't gain anything. For example, in 10 days at noon, there would be a great battle on Julie Mountain. The two sides who would fight to the death on this mountain had great backgrounds. One was the famous wild cultivator Huang Shi, the other was a female martial artist Xiao Niang. Both of them were among the top 10 youths of North Continent, and their rankings were close, one 4th and the other 5th. As for the reason for this battle, the two mountain and river court bulletins had different records. One said that Huang Shi returned to his old profession and met that female martial artist with a strange name in Jianghu. Another said that the two of them fought in a broken heavenly abode for the sake of an immortal treasure. They couldn't determine a victor, so they agreed to fight on Julie Mountain. This battle was extremely eye-catching, and would definitely attract the attention of many cultivators of the upper 5 realms. It was completely conceivable that the mountain near Julie Mountain that was bought by the Jade Forest sect and built many immortal residences, would definitely be packed with people. In the Shu Hen shop on the cross-continent ferry of the Hemp sect, Chen Pingan had bought a spirit tool that could be used on Julie Mountain's mirror flower, water and moon. It was a glazed, glossy and lustrous porcelain brush washer. However, although it was said that he had bought it, it was only later that he found out that it could be recorded on Julie Mountain. Regarding the Aquarius continent, the mountain and river court bulletins actually had a few pieces of news, and the length was not small. From this, it could be seen. Regarding the small Aquarius continent that no one would pay attention to, after the hooves of the Song clan's cavalry trampled all the way from the northernmost to the southernmost Old Dragon City, the cultivators of the other continents already had a big change in their perception of the smallest continent under the heavens. The true master of the Dali cavalry, the martial artist Song Jianqiang. After challenging the heavenly monarch Xie Shi, the sword immortal of the Wind Snow Temple, Wei Jin, rushed to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. These two, of course, had the greatest contribution. Then there was that Martial Mountain's Ma Ku Xian. In a short half a year, he had killed 2 powerful Jindan sword cultivators of the Zhuiying dynasty, and was already hailed as the #1 young cultivator of the Aquarius continent by the North Continent's mountain and river court bulletins. Then, this person single-handedly destroyed the Ocean Tide cavalry, humiliating the clan that had a grudge against him. A young female cultivator luckily did not die, and instead became Ma Ku Xian's personal servant. In the eyes of the chief writer of the mountain and river court bulletins, Ma Ku Xian, a unique existence, should not have been born in the Aquarius continent. He should have been like the female sect leader of the Cool Breeze sect, He Xiaoyong, taking root in the North Continent and establishing his own sect. Since he was destined to be a dragon that could overturn rivers and seas, it would be a pity to shake his head and wag his tail in a small pond like the Aquarius continent. The chief writer also said that he was going to write about the 10 young cultivators of the Aquarius continent, and when the time came, he would make a comparison with the 10 new cultivators of the North Continent. The articles written by the North Continent's mountain and river court bulletins, towards the cultivators of the Aquarius continent, inevitably revealed a sense of superiority. But compared to the early years, they were too lazy to even look at them, and did not even mention them. It was very different. Other than that, there was also the matter of the great god of Dali, Wei Pai's breakthrough. Within the jurisdiction, there were auspicious signs everywhere, and there were continuous auspicious signs. It was obvious that he was going to become a mountain god of the upper 5 realms. From this, it could be seen that the prosperity of the Song clan was not to be underestimated. The court bulletins began to remind the many businessmen of the North Continent that they could place their bets on the Dali dynasty early. If they were late, they might not be able to get a share of the pie. Regarding this matter, intentionally or unintentionally, it also mentioned a few words about the hemp sect, and was full of praise for the sect leader Zhu Quan. This was because according to the rumors, the Skeleton Beach and the Wood Clothing Mountain were obviously one step ahead, and the cross-continent ferry should already have some connection with the Dali Northern Peak. Then there was the True Realm sect of the Tongyi Continent's Jade Gui sect, the location of the Bookslip Lake, and the court bulletins were not stingy with their detailed descriptions. When Chen Pinggan saw those words, it was as if he could clearly feel the anger of the person who wrote them. There was no other way. The first sect leader of the True Realm sect was called Jiang Shangzhen. He was a troublemaker whose cultivation level was not too high, but the North Continent was helpless against him. This guy alone had harmed 3 of the 10 fairies of the North Continent in the early years. It was also rumored that the other 2 female cultivators of the sect, who were outstanding beauties, seemed to have interacted with Jiang Shangzhen in the past. However, there were no clear clues as to whether or not they had a heart-wrenching love affair. Therefore, at the end of the court bulletins, there was a lot of criticism about the Dali cavalry and the new emperor of the Song clan. Because they were simply eating **tea. They actually watched as the True Realm sect successfully chose a location and took root in the middle of the Aquarius continent. If the Song clan secretly colluded with Jiang Shangzhen, they would be eating **tea and drinking piss. They could have plotted with anyone else to achieve great things, but they just had to do business with a sinister villain like Jiang Shangzhen. What else could it be other than asking a tiger for its skin? From this, it could be seen that the Dali Xiao who deceived his master and destroyed his ancestors, was not that smart. Even if he was lucky enough to take credit for himself and annexed a continent, he would not be able to protect his country. It would only be a flash in the pan. A mountain and river court bulletins could be said to be strictly worded, reasonable, and beautiful. Only when it came to the True Realm sect and Jiang Shangzhen's side, it began to break down, cursing and scolding like a woman in the marketplace who had read books. Chen Pinggan was actually very curious about the origin of these mountain and river court bulletins. That year at the Bookslip Lake, he only knew a little. Earlier, at the Lotus Blossom Blessed Land, there was a venerated pavilion shrouded in clouds and mist, which specialized in collecting the inside stories of the Jianghu. Chen Pinggan returned to the ferry house and took out a book written for the ferry. It was a small book that described the scenic spots along the way. After setting off from the Peach Blossom Ferry, the first scenic spot was a celestial sect on the border of the water-sky country called Cloud Above City. The founder of the sect traveled far away to the Liuxia continent by chance and obtained a half-refined cloud sea from a broken blessed land. At first, it only had a radius of 10 miles. Later, it was established at the border of the water-sky country, which was relatively rich in water luck. After generations of founders' continuous refinement and enhancement, it absorbed the essence of the mist and supplemented by the Cloud Seal talisman to stabilize the Cloud Sea. Now, the Cloud Sea had a radius of more than 30 miles. The ferry would stop at Cloud Above City for 12 hours, hovering at the edge of the city. Before dawn, the ferry slowly came to a stop. Chen Pinggan stopped the 3-in-1 fist stance and woke up from the mysterious half-asleep state. When he walked out of the house, he carried a bag on his back. Outside Cloud Above City, there was a market where wild cultivators gathered. They could trade goods from the mountain, and they were all in the same trade. Chen Pinggan took out a few worthless celestial objects from the pile. They were all leftovers from the shop on Laohui Street. Their quality couldn't be considered good, but they were relatively rare. Their appearance was pleasing to the eye, and they were suitable to be sold to those spendthrifts who thought it was difficult to buy good things with money. However, this time, the bag shop was selling a few talismans that had nothing to do with the true works of alchemy. Most of them were the secret manuals of the Array Master from the first batch of Deer Mountain assassins. Among them, 3 were the Tian Bu Ting talisman, the Great River Flowing talisman, and the Earth-Raising talisman. They were quite powerful when used in battle. Before Qi Jinglong left, he also taught Chen Pinggan 2 heterodox barrier-breaking talismans. They were called the Bays Road Leading Talisman and the Sword Aura Bridge Crossing Talisman. He had learned them himself from ancient books, and they didn't involve any sect secrets. The two talismans' quality wasn't high, but outsiders who wanted to buy the talismans and secretly learn them could forget about it. This was because there were many tricks to drawing talismans, and the strokes were cumbersome. Moreover, it was very different from the main branches of the talisman sects. It was only because Qi Jinglong explained it in detail and helped Chen Pinggan repeatedly ponder over it that Chen Pinggan was able to learn the two talismans. Therefore, Chen Pinggan always felt that it was a pity that Qi Jinglong didn't go to the academy to teach. A martial artist drew talismans to maintain a breath of pure zhenqi. However, the talisman didn't last long. It could only open a mountain, but not seal it. However, the advantage was that it didn't need to consume the spiritual qi of a cultivator's qi dwelling. Moreover, talisman drawing itself was an uncommon martial art practice. It could refine that breath of zhenqi. However, Chen Pinggan discovered that after reaching the third realm of qi refining, talisman drawing became much smoother. However, the benefits to his body were extremely small. Chen Pinggan didn't want to use too much cinnabar talisman paper. After all, a talisman that couldn't retain spiritual qi was equivalent to losing divine money every moment. Moreover, if a real battle were to break out, his little talisman skills wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't even be the icing on the cake. Instead, it would delay the battle. However, when a cultivator drew talismans, they would naturally seal the mountain. The spiritual qi in the talisman gallbladder would dissipate very slowly. However, the more powerful the talisman was, the easier it was to wear out the gallbladder. According to legend, the ancestor who slayed demons and devils, the celestial master mansion of Longhu Mountain had a forbidden area. There was a talisman that required the grand celestial master of each generation to bless it once every 60 years. Historically, there was a great disturbance in the celestial master mansion. After the old celestial master ascended, the candidate for a new celestial master was still undecided. It just so happened that the 60-year cycle of talismans was critical. However, if the new celestial master didn't appear, the celestial master seal wouldn't be handed over to others. Therefore, the new talisman couldn't be completed. This caused a slight flaw in the ancient talisman, which allowed it to escape from a great demon that had been suppressed for countless years and disappeared without a trace. For some unknown reason, the first thing the new celestial master did after succeeding the position was to personally take the immortal sword and Dharma seal to White Emperor City. The talisman Chen Pinggan sold was all talismans drawn after the mountain temple in the water mansion formed a landscape. Otherwise, it would be a scam. Although the business of the bag shop depended on the eyesight of the buyer and the seller, similar to the antiques in the secular world, there would be some who would be eye-catching if there was a bargain. However, Chen Pinggan was still willing to talk about Jianghu ethics. To talk about ethics, one had to spend money. Because these talisman required Chen Pinggan to consume a considerable amount of spiritual qi in the water mansion. However, there were gains and losses. What he lost was some savings in the small pond in the water mansion. What he gained was that he could try to gradually open up a fundamental meridian for the operation of the water mansion, similar to a hidden water vein in the rivers and lakes. Therefore, the group of boys in green didn't have any objections. On the contrary, they supported Chen Pinggan's talisman drawing. On the path of cultivation, how to view gains and losses was Tao. As for the balance between gains and losses, it required Chen Pinggan to draw talismans for a long time. He had to constantly explore and ponder. Fortunately, the boys in green in the water mansion would also remind him. Chen Pinggan wore a black robe and held a green bamboo cane. He walked out of the house and looked up. In the secular dynasty, there were families in the depths of the clouds and immortals in the mountains. As expected, there was a city above the clouds. Outside the city, there was a small market town that was brightly lit. The city above clouds was an important place for cultivation. It was heavily guarded and very few outsiders were allowed to enter. It was probably because of the different environment. The city above clouds, which was under the jurisdiction of the water heaven country like the Sparrow Mansion, also made robes called the Cloud Robe. However, the quantity and quality of the robes were far less than the Sparrow Mansion. It wasn't famous and its business was mediocre. Most of the cultivators in the lower 5 states, especially those in the mountains and lakes, would weigh their money and buy one. It was probably because of the limited financial resources of the sect that the bag shop appeared in the market. Not to mention the shops that didn't have legs, even the stalls with legs had to pay a sum of money to the city above clouds. The ferry stopped at a distance of 500 feet from the sea of clouds. It couldn't get any closer. Otherwise, if the bow of the ferry accidentally hit the sea of clouds or if the distance was too close, it would drift with the wind. The slight friction between the body of the ferry and the sea of clouds would cause damage to the foundation of the city above clouds. Therefore, those who disembarked from the ferry could ride on the clouds or spiritual beasts as they wished. If it was a pure martial artist below the golden body state, this distance of 500 feet would not be easy. Chen Pinggan took a deep breath and took a few steps back. Then, he rushed forward and jumped high. He stepped on the railing at the bow of the ferry and used the force to leap forward. After landing on the ground, his body swayed a few times and then he stood still. On the ferry that belonged to a vassal of immortals in the Dragon Palace Grotto Heaven, a middle-aged female steward extended her hand to her friend and said with a smile, "Give it to me." The two of them were betting on whether the young man with a sword on his back who boarded the ferry at the Peach Blossom crossing of the Sparrow Mansion was a sword cultivator from the mountains or a swordsman from the Jianghu. The woman on the ferry guessed that he was a pure martial artist who carried a sword on his back, while the old cultivator in the sea-viewing realm guessed that he was a young sword cultivator who hid his strength. The old cultivator shook his head and said, "Can't this person deliberately use a camouflage?" This was stubbornness. It was obvious that he was going to renege on his debt and not pay. The woman sneered and said, "The young sword cultivators of our continent, those sword embryos, which one of them doesn't have the cultivation of the cave state, the demeanor of an earth immortal and the tone of an upper 5 state? Is there such a person?" The old cultivator said seriously, "The world is vast. It's not strange for there to be someone who is willing to hide his strength and be cautious." The woman steward said angrily, "Don't use your mouth to shit. Give me the money, one small sum of money." The old cultivator sighed and took out an immortal coin. He slapped it heavily on the woman's palm and then rode the wind to the city above clouds. The reason why the old cultivator disembarked from the ferry was because he wanted to buy a good quality cloud traveling robe for his direct disciple. After all, the women in the Sparrow Mansion were too black-hearted in doing business. The goods were good, but the price was too high. The old cultivator could only settle for the next best thing. In the early years, he had paid a deposit to the workshop that made the robe in the city above clouds. Therefore, the style and cloud seal talisman were all custom-made. He could also add some heavenly materials and earthly treasures to increase the robe's efficacy in the city above clouds. After that, as his master, he had to work hard at the foot of the mountain to earn money from all over the place. Just like that, he diligently accumulated money for dozens of years. He finally managed to gather enough immortal coins when his proud disciple reached the cave state. Cultivation was not easy. Especially when there was a small mountain, like the head of a family, he had to worry about daily necessities. The woman steward was just about to be happy when she suddenly realized that the weight of the immortal coin in her hand was not right. The spiritual energy did not match the immortal coin. She looked down and immediately jumped and cursed. It turned out that it was just a piece of snow. However, the old cultivator was already full of energy. He flew past the market and went straight to the city above clouds. After the woman finished scolding, she felt a little better and smiled again. She was able to pluck a handful of feathers from this notoriously stingy rooster. Even if it was only a snowflake, it was still an amazing thing. She was a golden core cultivator, not a cross-continent ferry. A golden core steward was enough. Moreover, a golden core cultivator in the Dragon Palace Grotto Heaven could be treated as a nascent soul cultivator in terms of status. This was because, besides her own sect, she was also related to the Cloud Palace of the Great Yuan dynasty and the floating duckweed sword lake. To the cultivators on the mountain, business relationships that could earn them money were more reliable than the monarch and vassal relationships at the foot of the mountain. As for the old cultivator that she had known for a long time, his future was not good. He was already so old at the sea-viewing realm. One had to know that this person back then was not a miser at all. Instead, he was very carefree, romantic, and heroic. However, after more than 100 years, everything seemed to have been worn away. He was no longer young and handsome. He also did not have the spirit of the past. He had become an old cultivator who spent all his time in the noble mansions at the foot of the mountain and searched for treasures in the Jianghu. However, she still liked him. As for whether she only liked the man back then or the old man now, she could not tell. Chen Pinggan entered the market. There was an empty spot on the bustling street with many pedestrians. He had just opened his bag and set up a stall. Inside, he had already prepared a large piece of green cotton cloth. Opposite him and beside him were people of the same trade. Some were yelling with all their might, some were willing to take the bait, and some were yawning listlessly. Soon, a young man and woman wearing snow-white robes came to collect money. A piece of snow a day would cost money. Chen Pinggan asked if he would pay half price if he stayed for 4 to 5 hours. The young male cultivator smiled and shook his head. He said that a piece of snow would cost money. Chen Pinggan did not say anything else. He handed out a piece of snow to spend money. The skeleton beach at the southernmost tip of the continent and the Yaoye River sold gloomy tea. The rules were similar. Chen Pinggan asked a few more questions. If he wanted to rent or buy a shop in the market in the city above clouds, what would be the price? The young male cultivator told him one by one with a pleasant expression. Shops were divided into 3, 6, and 9 grades. There was also a price difference between renting and buying. In the end, this foreigner who came down from the ferry boat to try his luck only expressed his thanks and no longer mentioned the matter of the shop. The young male cultivator's expression also didn't change. He even said some celebratory words to this young cultivator from the mountains and lakes, wishing him luck in opening the shop. Chen Pinggan squatted down and began to arrange his belongings. There was the hard yellow goddess painting from the City of Murals, the treasures of several great monsters such as the Empress of the Skeleton Beach, and also several items from the Dragon Palace at the bottom of Kangyun Lake. There were more than 20 scattered items, all of which were far from being magic treasures. However, there were even more talisman sheets. The 5 types of talisman were neatly arranged on the green cloth like soldiers in a battle formation. Chen Pinggan looked up. The young man and woman from the city above clouds were walking side by side on the main street, slowly disappearing into the distance. The young man seemed to be the manager of this market. He was familiar with the shopkeeper and many of the bag dealers. The young woman did not speak much. She looked more at the man beside her. Her eyes were whispering to him. Chen Pinggan held his hands in his sleeves, calmly watching this scene. The scenery was excellent. The tourists on the streets here, because they were all cultivators, were much more taciturn compared to the mortals who visited temple fairs, shops, and stalls. Moreover, they were much more patient. Almost all of them strolled through the various bag dealers, but they did not casually ask about the price. Their footsteps were slow. Occasionally, they would come across an item that caught their eye. Only then would they crouch down and carefully examine it. After some inspection, they felt they had a good idea of what was going on, so they silently stood up and walked away. Some would try to haggle. Generally, they would ask for a cut in half when they opened their mouths. The good-tempered stall owners would stubbornly explain the origin of the immortal artifact, how it was not easy to obtain and how it had a great origin. The bad-tempered stall owners would simply ignore them. Buy it if you want. I don't want to serve you bunch of poor people who don't have good eyesight. Chen Pinggan soon welcomed his first customer. It was an old man holding a young child's hand. He crouched down and glanced at the various items on the green cloth. Finally, his gaze fell on a row of 10 yellow paper talisman. The old man stared at the 5 types of talisman. The talisman paper was very ordinary, and the cinnabar quality was not bad. However, the final appearance of the talisman, as well as the method of drawing talismans. Different talisman had different grades. The old man quickly came up with an estimate in his heart. He had to open his mouth and haggle. He did not expect to have such an unexpected gain tonight just by taking his grandson out of the city for a walk. The old man pointed at a row of thunder talismans and smiled. "Shopkeeper, how much is the price of these thunder talismans if you buy them individually?" Chen Pinggan smiled. "1 thunder talisman, 11 snowflakes will cost you money. If you buy all 10, 100 snowflakes will cost you money. However, this stall of mine does not haggle." The old man nodded and smiled. "The talisman is a good talisman. It's just that the material of the talisman paper is slightly inferior. It can't bear the full power of this thunder talisman, so it's greatly discounted. Also, the price is a bit expensive." Chen Pinggan smiled and did not speak. The other party should be at least half an expert. Then there was even less need for him to say anything. The old man then asked about the price of earth talismans and water talismans. They were more or less the same. A talisman was only worth 1 or 2 snowflakes. The thunder talisman was the most expensive. After all, thunder arts were known as the ancestor of all arts in the world. Moreover, one of the foundations of Longhu Mountain's celestial master abode was the 4 words Thunder Arts Orthodox. However, according to Qi Jinglong, this thunder talisman could only be sold at a passable price if paired with yellow seal talisman paper. Otherwise, the power of drawing talismans on ordinary yellow paper was too mediocre. Ordinary cultivators of the middle 5 realms might not even pay attention to it. In the end, Chen Pinggan said, "Qi Jinglong thinks that you're not an ordinary talisman. Do I still need to be a bag shop to sell it?" Finally, the old man shifted his gaze and asked, "If I'm not wrong, are these 2 talismans of the barrier-breaking talisman type?" Chen Pinggan nodded and said, "It's a secret taught by an expert. It's the only one in the world. I studied hard for many years before I succeeded in drawing talismans. However, I can only guarantee a success rate of 50 to 60%. The talisman paper is wasted. If I sell it cheaply, I'll be ashamed to face the expert." The old man looked up at the young stall owner in a black robe with a long sword on his back. After a moment of hesitation, he asked, "Shop owner, can you tell me the name of these 2 talismans?" Chen Pinggan was relieved. He really knew what was good for him. Chen Pinggan asked back, "The name of the talisman in the world is often in accordance with the true meaning of the talisman method. It will reveal the secret of heaven itself. If I may ask, when martial artists of Jianghu meet on a narrow path and kill each other, will they report the name of their fist moves?" The old man smiled and said, "Of course not." Chen Pinggan said, "If you want to buy talismans, even if it's only 1 each, I'm willing to reveal the 2 secrets of heaven for you." The old man held back his laughter and shook his head. "Not to mention a shop that sells talisman, even if it's a traveling shop like yours, if you really want to sell good talismans, it's normal to reveal a trace of the true meaning of the talisman. There's no need to hide it too much. There's no need to worry about selling good things." After Chen Pinggan finished speaking, he smiled and said, "However, since old Mister's eyesight is so good, I'll make a deal with you. You only need to buy 1 charm, and I'll tell you the names of 2 charms." The child squatting beside the old man widened his eyes. "Damn, this guy's skin is really thick." The old man nodded and said, "Okay, then I'll buy this talisman." The old man pointed at the sword energy bridge talisman. Chen Pinggan smiled and asked, "Won't you ask about the price first?" The old man said, "It's good luck to open a business in this world. I see that the shop has just opened and I'm the first customer. Even if it's for good luck, I should sell it at a lower price. What do you think?" Chen Pinggan nodded and said, "The original price is 15 snow coins. For this good luck, I'll sell it for 10. If the talisman's true meaning of the sword energy bridge talisman could be exchanged for divine money, it would be much more expensive than the heavenly thunder talisman, the great river talisman, and the earth talisman. However, the price of the magic arts and treasures on the mountain had always been much higher than the price of the defensive ones. Moreover, the talisman-breaking talisman was the entry talisman of the world's talisman, so it was difficult for the seller to raise the price. They relied on small profits and quick turnover to win by quantity. Often, the cultivators of the mountains and lakes needed more offensive magic treasures, while the masters of the archives were more willing to pay for talismans like the talisman-breaking talisman because the latter had more people and more consumption. The old man took out a money bag from his sleeve, took out 10 snow coins and handed them to the other party. After Chen Pinggan received the money, he was just about to pick up a talisman-breaking talisman. Unexpectedly, the old man smiled and picked up one himself, putting it into his sleeve. Good fellow. His eyesight was really sharp. This was the talisman with the most divine intent among the talisman-breaking talismans. It was the last talisman of the talisman Chen Pinggan drew. Chen Pinggan glanced at the other side of the street from the corner of his eye, and told the old man with the increasingly skilled Heart Lake ripples, the talisman old sir bought is called the Sword Energy Bridge Talisman. It contains sword intent and is the rarest. While it breaks through the fog of mountains and rivers, it also has an invisible deterrence. As for the other talismans, they are guide talismans. When Chen Pinggan mentioned the second type of talisman, he intentionally omitted the two words by ze. This was because when Qi Jinglong taught this talisman, he did not directly call it by ze. He said that it was reasonable to show some respect, so Qi Jinglong wrote the two words by ze. This was an extremely trivial matter. Because all the cultivators on the mountain knew that Bai Zi had long been jointly suppressed by the Confucian sages in one of the 9 majestic towers of the vast world. Even if they shouted Bai Zi 10,000 times a day, or even cursed, it would not violate the taboo. It was completely different from directly calling the name of the Confucian sage. It was just that Chen Pinggan was able to become friends with Qi Jinglong. It was on these extremely trivial matters that the knowledge and rules were connected. Chen Pinggan used his hand as a pen and wrote the 5 words by Zi Guide Talisman in the air. After the old man read it, he nodded. The shopkeeper is honest and did not deceive me. So I plan to buy another guide talisman. Chen Pinggan said, the original price is 15 snow coins. Just treat it as old sir's business transaction, and it's still 10. The old man did not hesitate and handed over 10 snow coins. The child tugged at his grandfather's sleeve and said softly, a talisman-breaking talisman for 10 snow coins. It's so expensive. The old man laughed. Even if making money is difficult, snow coins are common, and good talismans are hard to find. These 2 talismans-breaking talismans are a good thing to keep. Chen Pinggan said from the bottom of his heart, old sir is wise. Then he changed the topic as he wished, not at all stiff. So, old sir might as well buy these 10 thunder talismans together. These thunder talismans can be considered to have met a noble person, so they won't meet a bad person and be wasted. No matter how good the child's upbringing was, he still couldn't help but turn his head and roll his eyes. The old man thought for a moment and laughed. Then, including the talisman-breaking talisman, I will buy 5 of each of the 5 types of talisman. These 2 talismans-breaking talismans are good talismans, and I am indeed moved. So, 15 snow coins for one, I won't bargain. 150 snow coins. As for the other thunder talismans, water talismans, and earth talismans, they are not the best. I am only willing to pay 120 snow coins. Chen Pinggan frowned and said, after dividing it evenly, 1 talisman is only 8 snow coins. The old man said, shopkeeper, by selling twice, I have bought 27 talisman in one breath. This is not a small business, and everyone on this street is watching. I am helping the stall to attract business, this is the truth, right? Chen Pinggan said righteously, don't, I guess most of the customers on the street already believe that we are in the same group. So, it really can't be considered to be soliciting business. Maybe it will leave a bad impression and delay the next business of my stall. Old sir, to be honest, I am also telling the truth, right? The child only felt that it was an eye-opener. The old man laughed and said, okay, then I will add 10 snow coins for the remaining 3 talismans. Chen Pinggan said with emotion, old sir, you have such good taste, you should have that kind of magnanimous demeanor of doing business, so that it can match old sir's vision and identity. The old man shook his head with a straight face and said, shopkeeper, if you continue to bully honest people like this, I will not buy a single talisman. Chen Pinggan smiled and said, good, good, good. Old sir is so kind. My little bag shop, it is rare for me to puff myself up at my own cost, so I will be magnanimous this time. I don't want the 10 snow coins that old sir increased the price. 25 talisman, I will only charge old sir 270 snow coins. The child didn't feel that this guy was magnanimous at all. He raised his two small hands and moved his fingers slightly. He quickly calculated the price in his mind, worried that this guy would cheat people. Fortunately, the price was like this. The child put away his palm, still feeling that it was too expensive, but his grandfather liked it and felt that it was good, so he didn't help to bargain. Otherwise, when he haggled, even he felt afraid. The old man took out 3 pieces of small summer money from his money bag and used the extra 30 pieces of snow money to bargain with the young man. He bought the painting of the goddess, which showed his skill, and the small Schwanby tea cake. He planned to give it to his good friend when he returned. The old man chose 5 talisman from each of the 5 rows. Chen Pingan let the old man choose. But the old man's choice made Chen Pingan a little surprised. He asked softly with the ripples in his heart, "Old sir has such good taste, why don't you choose the better talisman, but choose the slightly inferior talisman?" The old man seemed to find it very strange. He smiled and said, "Shopkeeper, your business experience is very unusual." Chen Pingan didn't say anything more. There was no need to say more. There were many strange things in the world, but people were still the most unpredictable. The old man left. Others came. Chen Pingan's stall became much more lively. There was an endless stream of onlookers, but there was no one who was really willing to pay. The old man whose name was unknown was still shopping with his grandson and looking at the shops. Then, he disappeared. Chen Pingan squatted on the ground with his hands in his sleeves. In his sleeves, he rubbed the snow coins with the words often envious of the world's talisman and Susie's poems are like paintings. The snow coins in the world were so interesting. There were many different characters. Within a continent, the snow coins had many different characters. But most of them were 4 characters on one side. It was extremely rare to see a snow coin with as many as 7 ancient characters. What made Chen Pingan happy was that other than earning the unexpected 3 snow coins, he was also happy that he had collected a brand new snow coin. Moreover, the 3 snow coins had a premium when it came to snow coins. Adding the rare characters, it was a small premium. Originally, Chen Pingan's estimate of the value of all the talisman was to cut it in half. This trip to the bundle shop in Cloud City. Generally, in the shops at the Immortal Ferry, as long as the talisman was made of yellow paper and the talisman was drawn like a talisman gallbladder, it was already a high price to sell 1 snow coin. Chen Pingan was actually prepared for the worst if the price was too high and he lost a snow coin. He never thought that he was fated to have 3 snow coins. They insisted on running into his pocket. He really couldn't stop them. Everything was difficult at the beginning. With that rich old man with good eyesight, it was a good sign. Next, he sold 2 more thunder talismans. No one cared about the water and earth talismans and the barrier-breaking talisman. Many customers almost cursed when they heard the price. One of the men with a rough appearance used 5 snowflakes to buy an old treasure from the Dragon Palace of Kangyun Lake. The smell of cosmetics was very strong. The man most likely wanted to give it to the woman he liked or as a gift to some female cultivator. After hearing the young vendor say that 5 snowflakes cost money, the man cursed, but in the end, he still obediently paid the money. Then, he pointed at the dignified heavenly thunder talisman and asked for the price. Chen Pingan smiled and said, 2 curs, and 2 more snowflakes to spend money. The man cursed, "Kid, are you killing a pig?" Even with Chen Pingan's thick skin, he didn't know how to respond for a moment. The tourists who were watching the fun laughed. The man also realized that his words were inappropriate. He scolded others and himself. No matter how he looked at it, it wasn't worth it. The man scratched his head. He really needed to buy an offensive thunder talisman to deal with a great demon that occupied a mountaintop. If he succeeded, he would be able to plunder the great demon that occupied the top of a mountain. If he succeeded, he would be able to plunder the great demon, and it would be a steady profit. However, if he failed, then he would be in for a huge loss. In the end, the man still couldn't bear to cut the meat and left resentfully. Chen Pingan didn't ask him to stay. The man walked out for a distance and couldn't help but turn his head to look. He saw the young man smiling at him. The man's thoughts fell through, and he felt even more uncomfortable. He strode away. Out of sight, out of mind. Chen Pinggan continued to do business. It was also worry-free. In any case, the price of the talisman and all the items were fixed. After earning 3 small coins, his bag shop became more and more stable in his fishing platform. In any case, less than 2 hours had passed. There was still quite a bit of time before the ferry set off. Chen Pinggan originally planned to do business while nourishing his fist intent. In addition, he cultivated by the Heart Lake. He didn't delay any of the 3. But for some reason, he only enjoyed the leisure at the moment and didn't practice boxing for the time being. He was still multitasking, carefully sizing up the tourists on the street. At the same time, he let his mind wander thousands of miles, thinking about some people and some things. As he was currently in Cloud City, Chen Pinggan thought of the Cloud Gem book. Speaking of which, the first bag shop that Chen Pinggan met in his life could actually be considered the guy who wore a bamboo hat and carried a bamboo blade. At that time, Wei Pai was still the local lord's Chestun Mountain. It was just that this bag shop didn't accept money. Alliance squatted on the ground. In front of him, the long wooden box called Delicate Yellow was placed. He shouted for business and called for everyone to go over and pick a treasure. Zhu He and Zhu Lu were also there at that time. Lin Shuyi ran the fastest. He was the first to choose the Thunder Technique secret manual of love at first sight. Li Huai was clever. After he chose an item, he desperately urged Lin Shuyi and Li Baoping to pick the narrow saber auspicious symbol. When Li Baoping picked up the saber, Li Huai grabbed the palm-sized painted puppet with lightning speed. Zhu He helped Zhu Lu choose a book and a pill. Back then, Chen Pinggan still didn't know how much that small pill called Hero's Gallbladder meant to a pure martial artist. Even though Chen Pinggan had walked so many roads, he still hadn't seen anything similar. Even Lu Tai and Qi Jinglong had never heard that the world's martial artist's gallbladder could be refined into a pill. Chen Pinggan was the last person to choose. In any case, there was only that light golden lotus seed left in the wooden box. He couldn't pick anything else. Chen Pinggan, who was no longer a teenager, now hoped that one day in the future, he could learn from Alliance and give the good things in his hands to those juniors who could pick them up and receive them. Not only would they not feel distressed, but they would also be filled with anticipation. In the world, there were always some words and deeds that would be imperceptibly passed down from generation to generation. It wasn't Daoist magic, but it was better than Daoist magic. After daybreak, the old man who threw money away held the child's hand and walked through the gate of above Cloud City. When the gatekeeper saw the old man, he respectfully greeted him as Daoist Huan. The old man smiled and nodded in greeting. They returned to a rich and powerful mansion in the city. There were only a few treasured lands in above Cloud City that were willing to hand over their deeds to outsiders. This mansion was one of them. This was because the old man's name was Huan Yun. He was a Daoist perfected one who was famous in the central part of the North Continent. The old perfected one's cultivation and combat strength were not of much use in the North Continent where sword cultivators were common. He could only be considered an ordinary golden core cultivator who was not good at fighting. However, he was of high seniority, had a wide network of connections, and had many followers. He was a person who had attained Dao from a branch of the Central Plains talisman lineage. He was proficient in talisman and had far surpassed his cultivation level. He had a good relationship with the other Daoist lineages, including the Yang family of the Cloud Palace, as well as many great cultivators of the north. He liked to travel around the world as his home. Of course, he would buy a mansion in a place with beautiful scenery. He had already bought a mansion with a wide view at Julie Mountain. It was cheap back then, but now it was unknown how many times the price had increased. The old perfected one had a wide network of friends. His mansion on Julie Mountain was always occupied by people. On the contrary, the old perfected one himself might not even stay there for more than 10 years. The child's name was Huan Bai. He was a potential cultivator. Even the descendants of Earth immortal cultivators might not be able to cultivate. None of the children of the old perfected one could cultivate. Such a good seedling had appeared in such a large family for more than 100 years. Therefore, The old perfected one liked to bring the child with him when he traveled all over the world. When they arrived at the study, the old man carefully took out an exquisite small box made of beautiful wood from the spring dew garden. It was very lively with cloud patterns and water splashes. This box had a great history. It was called Cloud Lock Box. It was the Immortal's cave that was specially used by talisman experts to store precious talisman. The old perfected one's face was full of smiles as he gently placed the 27 talisman that he bought from the stall into the wooden box. Huan Bai was smart since he was young. He immediately knew that his grandfather did not take advantage of the situation. It was even possible that he had picked up a bargain. The old man sat on the chair and carried the child on his knees. He said earnestly, "Every immortal sect on the mountain will have a founder. Then, for the talisman drawing of the talisman in the world, the talisman drawing has reached a higher level but has not reached perfection. Those who first pick up the brush to draw the talisman that looks the most superficial in terms of technique and spirit, are the most precious and rare. Therefore, grandfather purposely chose the talisman with the worst appearance." At that time, that young man was still doubtful and took the initiative to remind grandfather that he is a good young man. He is talented in talisman drawing and his conduct in business is not bad. The old man was in a good mood as he told his grandson the inside story. He pointed to the wooden box that was already closed. As long as these talisman are maintained properly, there will be some mysterious opportunities. Of course, the possibility of that is extremely small. But cultivating on the mountain, the what if is a bad thing that can cause one's Tao to disappear, but it can also be a good thing that can bring great fortune. Even if we don't mention this accident, these talisman cost grandfather almost 3 small pieces of money. It is not a loss. Huan Yun suddenly smiled. The city lord has arrived. Let's go and welcome him. Huan Yun put down his grandson and walked out of the study to the courtyard. Immortal cultivators who were close to him naturally did not need to knock on the door. They only needed to release some of their qi. The city lord of the city above clouds was called Shenzhenze. He was a golden core cultivator like Huan Yun. He wore a white robe and looked elegant. He was a middle-aged man and it was obvious that he was a divine immortal. After his grandson bowed, Huan Yun went straight to the point. There is someone selling talisman in your family's market. It is of excellent quality. If you are late, you will miss it. I recognize 3 of the talismans. They are the Heavenly Thunder Talisman, the Great River Talisman and the Earth Talisman. They are not authentic and thus are not considered rare. But there are 2 barrier-breaking talismans that I have never seen in my life. The Guiding Talisman and the Bridge Crossing Talisman are excellent. The former is not only suitable for cultivators to go up the mountain and into the water, it can also be used to open the way for otherworldly items to go to the underworld. The latter contains a trace of pure sword will. Cultivators of the 5 realms in the city above clouds can use it to intimidate ordinary ghosts and demons. Shenzhenze was a little shocked. If an ordinary earth immortal cultivator said that a talisman was good, he would not dare to believe it completely. But when this old Daoist perfected said it, there was no doubt about it. Huan Yun continued, "It is a pity that the talisman is of poor quality and the cinnabar used to draw the talisman is also ordinary. Otherwise, a talisman would cost more than a dozen snowflakes." Shenzhenze was confused. Perfected Huan, a barrier-breaking talisman costs a dozen snowflakes. Is it not a good deal? Huan Yun smiled. Have I ever been wrong about whether a talisman is good or bad? Hurry, I will not let the city above clouds waste money on those snowflakes. Huan Yun described the young man's appearance and stall. Shenzhenze nodded. I will be back soon. Huan Yun suddenly reminded him. That talisman is very shrewd in his business. I advise you not to buy it yourself. It is also to prevent others from coveting it and harming that little cultivator. Although this person purposely took out the small dark wall tea from your neighbor's sparrow residence when he set up his stall, it can barely be used as a protective talisman. But money moves people's hearts. If someone really covets his wealth, this little relationship will not be able to prevent disaster. Shenzhenze understood and flew away with the wind. He went to the center of the city to buy a talisman and then returned to his residence. This time, he came to discuss something with the old perfected master Huan Yun. In the territory of the western neighbor of Water Sky Country, in a remote mountain, there was a secret realm of mountains and rivers. A mountain woodcutter came across it by chance. He only found the entrance to the cave but did not dare to explore it alone. After he left the mountain, he treated it as a fortuitous encounter and told his fellow villagers about it. Then, a mountain cultivator who was passing by heard about it and went to the local government office. He carefully looked through the local county records and maps. He went to the cave alone but was unable to break the immortal restriction. Then, he joined forces with 2 other cultivators. Unexpectedly, the yin-yang cultivator broke the restriction in the middle of the night and triggered a mechanism in the cave. 2 cultivators died and only 1 survived. This news spread. After listening to Shenzhen's story, Huan Yun smiled and said, if a level 4 yin-yang cultivator could break the mountain and rivers restriction in such a short time, it means that the quality of the cave is not high. Why, as a golden core earth immortal, do you want to fight with those mountain cultivators for this fortuitous encounter? Shenzhen shook his head and said, I only plan to let a few young disciples of Cloud Above City go and gain experience. Then, I will send a Dragon Gate cultivator to secretly escort them. As long as there is no danger to their lives, they will not show themselves. Huan Yun smiled and said, if the fortuitous encounter is not small, Cloud Above City will not fight for it. Shenzhen still shook his head. Cloud Above City has suffered greatly. Perfected Huan, please don't make fun of me. Distant relatives were not as good as close neighbors. They were both on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain. However, there were many bad neighbors on the mountain. For example, Cloud Above City and Sparrow Manor, which were both in Water Sky Country. Ever since the battle between the previous city lord and the manor lord, although the 2 families did not become mortal enemies, the cultivators on both sides no longer interacted with each other. There was no longer any friendship between them. The relationship between the 2 sects that had been allies for hundreds of years was also broken because of an unexpected fortuitous encounter. At first, the old city lord was the Tao protector of his family's juniors, while his disciples were in charge of searching for treasures. However, in that untraceable broken grotto heaven's secret realm, there was a Daoist book that led directly to the Golden Core realm. Shenzhen's father and the previous manor lord of Sparrow Manor could not resist the temptation of the treasure, which they thought was within their reach. They did not expect that in the end, a rogue cultivator who hid extremely well took advantage of the stalemate between the 2 sides to severely injure the 2 Golden Core cultivators. He obtained the Daoist book and left. The 2 Golden Core Earth Immortals of Cloud Above City and Sparrow Manor suffered a misfortune because of their good fortune. They did not manage to reach the nascent Soul Realm and passed away with regrets. Since then, the 2 families hated each other and could not become a pair of immortal Daoist companions. Moreover, the most interesting thing was that the 2 Jindan stage cultivators did not have much hatred for the wild cultivator whose background they could not find out until the end of their lives. They regarded the priceless Daoist book as the Daoist fate that this person deserved. Before that, the 2 families were actually in-laws, which was rare on the mountain. Because of this, generations of emperors of Water Sky Country had been worried. They had tried many times to help the 2 families reconcile. However, Cloud Above City and Sparrow Manor did not accept their help. Huan Yun smiled. You want me to take care of them, just in case? Why, did your direct disciples leave the city for training? Shenzhen nodded. Not just one. Both of them are at a bottleneck and have to make this trip. Huan Yun said, at this juncture, the sealed grotto abode has reappeared. This is probably the opportunity for your 2 disciples. They cannot miss it. As the Daoist's disciple, you are too involved with your disciples. If you are too close, it will not be good. Shenzhen sighed. On the path of cultivation, there were not only good things to enjoy. Even the opportunity to break through to the next level would be filled with hidden dangers. It was impossible to guard against. Moreover, there were many experiences and rules that were exchanged with the lives of many seniors and masters. Huan Yun said, all right, I will be the Daoist's protector. Shenzhen stood up and bowed. Huan Yun did not avoid him. The child Huan Sai was obedient and sensible. He had already run away. Even if it was just a Daoist's protector on the path of cultivation, he was still a Daoist's protector. Shunzhenze had put in a lot of effort into this. It was natural for him to bow to a Daoist's protector for his two direct disciples. One of Shunzhenze's confidants rushed to the courtyard. He took out those talismans from his sleeve that couldn't be bought even if he tried to bargain for a single piece of snow. He said, "City Lord, that person insisted on keeping the last thunder talisman." Shunzhenze turned to look at Huanyun, guessing if there was a secret behind this. Huanyun smiled. That little cultivator has a strange temper. He left a talisman behind and didn't sell it. I don't think there's much to it. Shunzhenze took out one of the sword aura bridge talismans. He rubbed it lightly with 2 fingers. It was indeed extraordinary. However, it was expensive. He kept all the talisman in his sleeve. He nodded and smiled. I can give it to my disciples. The city above clouds can still keep 2 of them. Huanyun smiled. I was just giving some advice. It might be meaningless. However, the city above clouds should use the rest of the talisman sparingly. Don't squander it recklessly. As for the city above clouds spending money to buy another batch of talisman, forget about it. Otherwise, they will lose out. Shunzhenze could not be bothered with the deeper meaning behind this. He had already obtained the results he wanted by visiting Huan Zhenren today. Huanyun smiled and asked, I followed the commotion at the Fuchu Kingdom's sword ceremony. Did you hear anything? Shunzhenze shook his head. It happened so suddenly. I believe that the Sparrow residence, which is closer to the sword ceremony, can only confirm that one of them is Liu Jinglong. There are no clues about the other sword immortal. Be it the Fuchu country, the north and south countries bordering the Fuchu country or our water sky country, there are no clues. However, the city above clouds is not worthy of such a great sword immortal. Compared to the Sparrow residence, there is a beautiful fairy who is an old acquaintance of Liu Jinglong. Huanyun joked. You're too jealous. Shunzhenze was honest too. That's because of residence Lord Sun Qing's ability. Can't the city above clouds be envious? Huanyun stopped joking with the city lord of the city above clouds. It was normal to complain in front of an old friend due to internal and external problems. The internal worry was Shunzhenze of Cloud Above City. He could not be compared to Sun Qing, who had an excellent aptitude for cultivation and was extremely beautiful. On the other hand, Sparrow Manor was good at making money and had a vast source of income. If they were really ruthless, they could rely on the immortal money to produce a second Earth immortal of gold core. On the other hand, Cloud Above City was short of manpower. Among Shunzhenze's direct disciples, there was not even a single Dragon Gate Realm cultivator. As for external problems, they were neither small nor large. Any mountain that opened its doors for business would have them. Didn't immortal Huanyun see through the awkward situation of Cloud City on this trip? That was why he purposely came to stay after 60 years to cheer for Shunzhenze. Shunzhenze said self-deprecatingly. If that sword immortal whose name I don't know is on good terms with the city above clouds like perfected Huan, a useless golden core cultivator like me would have nothing to worry about. Huanyun shook his head. Don't be discouraged. According to the Dao sect, if you beat yourself to death in your own home without knowing it, the great Dao will be truly severed. Shunzhenze smiled bitterly. He understood the logic, but so what? On the market street, Chen Pinggan was still squatting in his sleeves. He looked up at the sky and estimated the time. If that person did not come, he would have to pack up his stall in less than an hour. The ferry waited for no one. On a large piece of green cloth, there were 50 talisman. Only a lonely Heavenly Division Thunder talisman was left. As for the other miscellaneous items, most of them were sold. In total, they only earned about 70 or so snow coins. The ones who really earned the most money were still those talisman. It was rare for the business of the bag shop in the mountains to be so prosperous. As for the cultivator who came later, it was obvious that he came from the city above clouds. Compared to the first old man, be it in terms of foresight or business methods, his Dao was far inferior. It was only because Chen Pinggan was fair in his dealings. Otherwise, It would be easy for him to earn 100 or so snow coins from the other party's pockets. When it came to business, the seller liked it when the other party had no choice but to buy. Although it was clumsy, it could not hide its intentions. This was equivalent to giving money to the seller. Chen Pingan basked in the early winter sun and closed his eyes to take a nap. On the street, the people with ferry passengers had already begun to pack up their stalls. Most of their business was average and there was no joy on their faces. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, a man pretended to shop around a few bag shops. Then, he dawdled over to Chen Pingan's side. He did not squat down and smiled. "What, you can't sell these?" Chen Pingan raised his head and said unhappily, "What, did you pick up money on the road? You want to buy them all? I'll give you a 30% discount, including this thunder talisman. How about it?" The man was very sullen. Chen Pingan did not speak anymore. The man squatted down and picked up those items. However, he did not look at the thunder talisman. The man occasionally asked about the price of some miscellaneous items. The stall owner would answer all of his questions. However, he did not speak much. It seemed that he was about to pack up and leave. When Chen Pingan stretched his hand out of his sleeve, the man gritted his teeth and asked, "Since you can't sell this thunder talisman, how about you sell it to me at a discount?" Chen Pingan glanced at the man's boots. They were carefully sewn, but they were very worn out. They could not be considered good craftsmanship and could not be compared to the ones sold in shops. They were only good at heart. He smiled and said, "You're a cultivator. Don't you think it's shabby to wear such rags when you're outside?" The man was stunned for a moment and subconsciously withdrew his feet. Then, he became angry out of humiliation. "Why do you care what kind of boots I wear? It's fine as long as the boots can be worn. What else do you want?" Chen Pingan also said angrily, "Show me some respect. You're just a little cultivator of the fourth realm. How dare you talk to a great cultivator of the cave realm like that?" The man was a bit stunned and also a bit guilty. He glanced at the black robe on the other party. If it was really a robe that not even the immortal masters of records on the mountain could afford to wear, then he could not afford to offend him. The man became more and more helpless and decided to give up. If he did not want to buy it, then he did not want to buy it. There was no reason to be humiliated. Unexpectedly, that person suddenly said, "I'm going to close my stall. Today's luck is not bad. I have a good start, so I won't keep this thunder talisman. I want to start well and finish well, so as not to ruin my next fortune. That's why the item you bought earlier, if I remember wrongly, cost 5 snowflakes. If you sell it back to me, I'll sell you this priceless thunder talisman that only appears once in 100 years at a 50% discount. How about it?" The man was in a dilemma. He lowered his head and glanced at the pair of old boots on his feet. It was not that he did not have the money to buy a new pair. No matter how expensive the boots on the street were, how many taels of silver could they be worth? It was just that traveling far away, he had to have something to think about. Especially for a cultivator of the mountains and swamps like him. His realm was low, the mountains and rivers were dangerous, and his life and death were uncertain year after year. Without any thoughts unrelated to cultivation in his heart, life was really difficult. The man waved his hand and stood up. "Forget it." Chen Pingan once again covered his hands in his sleeves. He pointed his chin at the thunder talisman. "Forget it. Earning money is a small matter, but fortune is a big matter. I'll sell it to you at a 50% discount. 8 pieces of snow will cost me." The man asked, "How about 7? Chen Pingan said straightforwardly, "Get lost." The man hurriedly crouched down and grabbed the thunder talisman that he could vaguely sense the flow of spiritual energy. When he was about to take out the money, he suddenly paused and asked, "Could it be that you switched it? Now you're selling me a fake talisman?" Chen Pingan's expression did not change. He added one more word. "Get lost." The man weighed the pros and cons. He opened his eyes wide and repeatedly checked the thunder talisman. Only then did he throw down the 8 pieces of snow to spend money. He got up and left. After walking a dozen steps, he broke into a mad dash. He was probably worried that the bag shop would go back on his word. It was Chen Ping'an's turn to be somewhat hesitant. He picked up the snow pieces one by one and carefully weighed them. They were all genuine, not fake money. After closing his stall, the package became a lot lighter. He returned to the ferry. Chen Ping'an planned to continue being a bag shop. When he returned to the house, he did not stop for a moment and buried himself in drawing talismans. It was a matter of cultivation. How could he slack off? However, after drawing more than 10 talisman in a row, there was movement in the water mansion. Chen Ping'an had to stop drawing. It just so happened that the ferry had officially set off, and there was also a view of Cloud City that could not be missed. As long as a ferry docked in the Sea of Clouds, Cloud City would take action. He should be able to earn some scattered immortal money from the ferry. Chen Ping'an walked out of the house. There were cultivators from Cloud City riding 3 ordinary talisman boats. Above this special Sea of Clouds, they cast a large net to catch a kind of flying fish that liked to peck the clouds. Of course, the flying fish itself could also be sold for money. Chen Ping'an leaned on the railing and admired the painting. Just like the fisherman who cast a net to catch fish, the scenery was green, but here was the Sea of Clouds. After that, he left the territory of the water firmament country and came to the long and narrow territory of the baiting country. During this time, he passed by a Huanyuan mountain that had incense burning but no Taoist temple. The good men and women in the world, if there was a wish, there would be a wish that would be fulfilled. Many places that used to burn incense might be thousands of miles away from their hometown. Many devout old people who were too old or sick and could not travel far, would entrust the young disciples of their family to make a trip to Huanyuan Mountain, which was not too far away, to burn incense and worship the gods. There was not only one Huanyuan Mountain in the North Continent. On the other hand, there was no such example in the Treasure Vase Continent and the Tongyi Continent. Chen Ping'an was not blinded by lard. He did not stay here as a bag shop and went down the boat to burn incense. However, he did not make a wish, nor did he fulfill a wish. He only burned incense to worship the mountain. At the back of Huanyuan Mountain, there was a reverse waterfall. Chen Ping'an watched there for a long time, but could not figure out the reason. On the other side of the deep pool, there was an unsheathed spring. Every time a sword cultivator or swordsman unsheathed his sword by the water, a mouthful of spring water would shoot up into the sky. Of course, if one was full of energy and shouted at the top of his lungs, the spring water would also fly up. However, it did not have the artistic conception, and the spring water was scattered. It was not as wonderful as the unsheathed sword, which seemed to appear out of thin air. When Chen Ping'an was looking at the inverted waterfall, he was also looking at the spring water that was forced out by people's roars. The sword immortal behind him rippled with sword energy in its scabbard. Chen Ping'an said telepathically, "Can we not be so childish? You should at least show some demeanor that an immortal weapon should have, right?" Only then did the sword immortal quiet down. Was it because a semi-immortal weapon was called an immortal weapon? Chen Ping'an was a little worried. Was the feng shui of Luopa Mountain really bad because of him? It did not make sense. How could he be compared to Pei Qian and Zhu Lian? Du Yu of the Ghost Hatchet Palace was the only one who was good at this. Chen Ping'an burned incense, saw the reverse waterfall and unsheathed spring, and returned to the ferry. He was still hesitating about one thing. Should he get off the ferry halfway and take the initiative to search for treasures for the first time in his life? Earlier, on the ferry, some cultivators were whispering about the discovery of a new immortal cave in the baiting country. However, those cultivators felt that there was no need to go. Just the city above clouds and Sparrow Palace of the Water Sky country, as well as the many powerful cultivators of the baiting country, as well as the well-informed mountain and lake cultivators, would have already left. Among the cultivators' words, the most taboo for these immortal masters was the group of mountain and lake cultivators who hunted for money without regard for their lives. If there was a conflict, they would either die or be injured. It was not worth it. Moreover, this kind of almost public immortal lucky chance was not a lucky chance at all. Chen Ping'an calculated that the ferry to the Dragon Palace Cave Heaven had a fixed route, about once a month. It would pass by the Peach Blossom Ferry of the Sparrow Mansion, the city above clouds, and the Hebo Ferry of the Baiting Kingdom. Therefore, if he got off the ferry, it would take about a month. Finally, at the Hebo ferry, Chen Pinggan got off the ferry. This trip was to learn from the scholar of Lujiao County, who used the pseudonym of Lu Dun, to explore the immortal world. It was a simple visit without any intention of winning, but Chen Pinggan was a little nervous for the first time, because he was used to not asking for help. As for the exact route of the nameless mountain, it was not difficult to know. There were cultivators leading the way. He stuck a steely carrying talisman of the Ghost Hatchet Palace on his body, and his injuries were almost healed. Although he had not recovered to his peak, he could survive 3 more punches from old senior Gu. Chen Pinggan hid himself and traveled over land and water without making a sound. If Zhu Lian and Pei Qian saw him, they would definitely praise him from the bottom of their hearts for appearing and disappearing unpredictably. On this night, Chen Pinggan sat on a high branch and rested. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and received a flying sword message from Liu Jinglong. The content of the letter was still short. It only had 2 sentences. Jiu and Jiu were dead. Jiu drew an ancient sword-sealing talisman on his chest and sealed Jiu's intrinsic flying sword for a moment, exchanging a life for a life. After Chen Pinggan fed an immortal coin to the sword box, the messenger flying sword left instantly. Chen Pinggan held the back of his head and looked up at the departing messenger flying sword. When Qi Jinglong returned to the north, the longer the journey, the easier it would be for the messenger flying swords to be lost. Therefore, this was the last messenger flying sword before Qi Jinglong entered seclusion to break through. Chen Pinggan sat on the tree branch. Some things were expected, so he was not too sad. However, he was a little disappointed, so he could only stay silent and not drink. End of chapter. 540. The latest issue of the journal has been released on the public account. Everyone can take a look. Fenghua 1985. The 3 of them traveled at night. The sound of the mountain stream was pleasant to the ears. It was a tall and skinny old daoist. His eyes shone brightly and he wore a loose daoist robe made of silk. The daoist robe looked old and was relatively complicated. There were still 12 pieces of embroidery on the robe, which should correspond to the 12th month of the year. He carried a peachwood sword on his back and a string of copper bells on his waist. Walking under the moon, the old daoist looked like a celestial being. A handsome young master with a bamboo cane and straw shoes was dressed in white. He carried a short saber with a golden scabbard. A sloppy man carried a bag and looked like a young man's follower. The 3 of them suddenly stopped. They could vaguely see someone sitting on the cliff with his back facing them. He seemed to be looking at something under the moonlight. The man glanced at the bell on the old daoist's waist. It did not move. The 3 of them heaved a sigh of relief. This bell was a rare spiritual artifact with a strong foundation. It belonged to the pagoda bell. It was originally an artifact hanging under the eaves of an ancient temple in the Dayuan dynasty. Later, in order to increase the scale of the Chongxian imperial temple, the emperor of the Great Yuan dynasty demolished several halls of the ancient temple. During this period, the bell of the pagoda was lost among the people. After changing hands several times, it finally disappeared without a trace. By chance, the current owner found it on a skeleton in a deep mountain cave. Together with the bell of the pagoda, he also obtained the corpse of the real body of a python. He earned 200 snow coins and kept the bell of the pagoda. It was not that he was worried about not being able to sell it for a high price, but that he was reluctant to part with it. Truly good things were always priceless. This bell was personally recorded in the silent collection by the owner of the Inner Voice House, Yu Yuan. However, this pagoda bell's ranking was rather low in the catalogue. But as long as it was a bell recorded in this catalogue, there was no need to worry about a lack of buyers. With this bell, cultivators would no longer need to use the necessary talisman, such as the barrier-breaking talisman, fiend observation talisman, heart-cleansing talisman and so on. It would be obvious once or twice, but when accumulated, these talisman would become a huge expense. Moreover, with the bell in hand, they could sell it at any time. Any immortal shop at the ferry port would be willing to spend a fortune. It was naturally best to directly find the inner voice house and sell it to the most knowledgeable nascent soul cultivator, Yu Yuan. The Buddhist bells had the three meanings of alarm, joy, and enlightenment. The baleful qi and the demonic ghost's cultivation. The stronger the filthy baleful qi, the stronger the demonic ghosts. Apart from this, it could also be used to break through barriers. Many of the barriers were similar to the mountains and rivers that made people and ghosts go around walls. With the bell's protection, cultivators could clear their eyes and calm their hearts. They would not be deceived. The young master communicated with his two friends telepathically. The three of us are all experts in close combat. We're still lacking someone with offensive techniques and treasures. Why don't we try our luck? The tall and thin old Daoist felt that it was feasible. Whether it was the Daoist robe on his body or the peachwood sword on his back, they were all camouflage. He was actually a wild cultivator who had stayed in a small Daoist temple for more than 10 years. The biggest regret in his life was not that he could not learn any Taoist spells in that shabby Daoist temple, but that he could not buy a Taoist genealogy certificate from the Daoist temple and the imperial court. According to seniority, it should have been his turn to buy the certificate. He did not expect his master to secretly sell the quota to a rich playboy from an influential family. He told him to wait for another 3 years. In the end, it would be 3 years after 3 years. After his master failed to keep the appointment, he said it would be his turn next time. He did not expect that he would die and pass the position of the Daoist temple to a junior brother from a well-off family. After he left the Daoist temple in anger, he went on the path of a rogue cultivator. He secretly took away the Daoist temple's treasure. It was a secret book that generations of Daoist temple masters had carefully kept, but no one could comprehend the way to immortality. The man felt that it was inappropriate. God knows where that guy came from. It was a temporary team. With a strange guy in the team, it could easily be a disaster. The young man smiled and said, "Let's take one step at a time. It'll be best if we succeed, but we won't lose anything if we don't. Besides, we'll split the loot. It's 3 against 1. Maybe we can get an extra sum of money, right?" The tall and skinny old Daoist smiled while stroking his beard. The man nodded and agreed. The young man smiled and said, "Let me test him. Daoist son and brother Huang, please wait." The young man walked forward alone. After a few steps, the black-robed man who had his back facing the 3 still did not move. When the young man slightly increased his pace and walked for more than 10 steps, the black-robed man suddenly turned his head and stood up. He stared at the young man who looked like the gongsun of a rich family. The young man stopped and smiled. "I'm Qin Juyuan, from the Jiao country. The 2 behind me are my friends. Among them, Daoist Sun's place of cultivation is the Thunder God residence in the Infant Mountain of East Sea. The person who preaches is one of the immortal masters of the Thunder God residence, the old immortal Daoist master Jingming. Unfortunately, Daoist Sun is still a registered disciple and has not entered the Hall of Patriarchs. Daoist Sun has traveled far to the east, slaying demons and eliminating devils. He has accumulated a lot of merits. After killing demons together, he became good friends with us. This time, he heard that an ancient immortal's cave appeared in the Baiting Mountain, so he wanted to come with us to see if there's a fated chance. On the other side of the stone cliff by the stream, there was a black-robed old man. His hands were hidden in his sleeves, and ripples flowed out of his sleeves. It was obvious that he was very wary of these 3 uninvited guests that he had met in the mountains. The black-robed old man squinted his eyes and asked, "The Thunder God residence in the Infant Mountain? What a coincidence, I've heard of it. It's rumored that the Thunder Talisman in the Infant Mountain can control thunder and lightning and summon wind and rain. It's very powerful. Not only that, I have a talisman of the Thunder God residence's secret technique." The old man took out a thunder talisman from his sleeve and held it high. He sneered and said, "I wonder if Daoist Sun can recognize the evil sun ghost suppressing talisman or the temple exorcism talisman from the Infant Mountain." The young man stood with his hands behind his back. One of his palms was open and the other was a fist. He signaled for the 2 people behind him to act according to the situation. When he pressed down on the hilt, It meant that they could attack each other in advance. However, this was the worst-case scenario. If the other party's talisman was too good and made people wary, they would temporarily brush past each other. On the surface, they would mind their own business. However, the two sides had already formed a grudge. As soon as there was a good opportunity, they would cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. The registry master on the mountain naturally didn't need to do this. This young bladesman was a disciple of a noble clan whose clan had declined. However, he was not from the Jiao nation. Qin Juyuan was also a pseudonym. The real Qin Juyuan was someone of the same age who made him suffer a lot in the Jiao nation. His real name was Di Yuanfeng. His swordsmanship was wholeheartedly taught by a consecrator of a family born at the border. The sword he carried was an immortal treasure passed down from his ancestors. He had only wandered the Jianghu for a few years, so he couldn't be considered a true rogue cultivator. However, he had already experienced the shrewdness of rogue cultivators below the mountain twice. The first time, he met that coarse-looking big brother Huang. The second time, he turned from an enemy to a friend and formed an alliance with Daoist's son. The tall and thin old Daoist took a few steps forward and casually glanced at the talisman in the black-robed cultivator's hand. He smiled and said, "Fellow Daoist doesn't need to test me like this. Although the talisman in your hand is undoubtedly a thunder talisman, it definitely isn't the two secret talismans of our thunder god residence. My baby mountain's thunder talisman is an ancient well. It resonates with heaven and earth and produces a pool of thunder and plasma. The divine firmament brush refined from this has a pure talisman light and a trace of scarlet red. This is something that no other talisman can have. Moreover, the talisman of the Thunder God Residence's 5 great ancestral halls has a secret that isn't passed on. Fellow Daoist clearly passed the mountain but didn't manage to ascend it. It's truly regrettable. If there is a chance in the future, you can return to the baby mountain with this poor Daoist. At that time, you will know the mystery." The black-robed old man nodded and put away the thunder talisman into his sleeve. He bowed to the registry master of the Thunder God residence on the baby mountain. "Greetings, Daoist Sunday." The young master heaved a sigh of relief. These King wild cultivators were each more cunning and shrewd than the other. They were really hard to please. The tall and thin old Daoist was naturally not a Daoist from the Thunder God residence. The Thunder God residence was a big mountain with 2 nascent soul ancestors overseeing it. It was a place where the Great Blasphemy Sea entered the area and was one of the top Daoist schools. How could the one surnamed Sun be so lucky as to become the disciple of one of the 5 great Taoists of the Baby Mountain? Although Daoist Master Jingming was the last Earth Immortal of the Gold Core realm in the Thunder God residence and couldn't be compared with the other 4 Earth Immortals, he was still an unreachable old Daoist immortal at the foot of the mountain. Fortunately, since this Daoist son dared to walk around the foot of the mountain under the guise of being a talisman of the Thunder God residence, he still had some knowledge about the talisman of the Thunder God residence. However, if the other party really took out a secret talisman of the Thunder God residence's Hall of Ancestral Masters, the one surnamed Sun would probably stare blankly because the latter was only hearsay. The 5 great talisman of the Thunder God residence had a lot to pay attention to, but Daoist Sun was not qualified to know what exactly it was. Fortunately, even if the other party wanted to get to the bottom of the matter, Daoist Sun didn't need to answer half a sentence. After all, if he really was the registry master, how could he casually reveal the secrets of his own Hall of Ancestral Masters? Therefore, Daoist Sun's response was reasonable. Putting himself in the other party's shoes, the young master himself had to eliminate most of his doubts. Right at this moment, the black-robed old man suddenly said another sentence without rhyme or reason. "Divine General Iron Chain suppressing mountain cry." The tall and thin Daoist laughed out loud. 5 thunders divine decree from the Crimson Palace. The old man obviously heaved a sigh of relief and bowed again. "I was rude. I apologize to Daoist Sunday." The black-robed old man obviously didn't care too much about the young man and the sloppy man. Di Yuanfeng's heart is full of criticism. Sure enough, the golden signboard of an immortal master of the Thunder God's residence is useful wherever he goes. During their travels, They have visited several small vassal states and third-rate mountains in that place. Di Yuanfeng and Li Wuyo have benefited from this and were treated as distinguished guests. The old man seemed to want to walk down the stone cliff and treat the three with respect. Halfway, he suddenly asked, "Daoist son, why didn't you wear the Thunder God Residence's standard Daoist robe when you went down the mountain to gain experience?" Di Yuanfeng was furious. Was there an end to this? He almost couldn't help but reach out and press the hilt of his knife. This old man was so cautious everywhere. Perhaps there really were many variables in the alliance. At the very least, the three of them wouldn't be able to kill him so easily. The tall and thin Daoist smiled while stroking his beard. He shook his head and said, "Wearing the mountain's Daoist robe and swaggering through the streets will only make me tired of socializing. Could it be that the experience is to be gained at a banquet with wine cups intertwined?" The black-robed old man smiled slightly and finally walked down the stone cliff. He sighed with emotion. "Daoist son, you're indeed a Daoist master of the infant mountain. Your cool heart away from the riches and honor of the mortal world is indeed admirable. Presumably, when you return to the Thunder God Residence's ancestral mountain this time, you'll definitely be able to progress further and become the direct disciple of Daoist Jingming and the ancestral hall." Then, the old fox wild cultivator in the eyes of the three people became a bit more respectful. He still only had Daoist son in his eyes. He smiled and said, "My surname is Chen. I come from Wuling country, which is poor in Daoist magic. My cultivation is insignificant and my sect is not worth mentioning. It's just a sad thing. I learned the art of drawing talismans by chance. It's just a small skill that makes me a laughingstock. I don't dare to show it in front of a talisman master like Daoist Sunday. I used the talisman to test you. Now that I think about it, I'm really ashamed. Daoist son is magnanimous. Please don't lower yourself to my level." Daoist son smiled and said, "When we're outside, there's nothing wrong with being careful. Brother Chen doesn't need to feel guilty." Daoist son took the lead and walked towards the black-robed old man. Di Yuanfeng and the sloppy man naturally followed behind. In fact, among the three of them, Di Yuanfeng had always been the leader. Therefore, he could take 40% of the loot and the other two would take 30%. The black-robed old man gave way to the stone cliff path. When Daoist son was climbing the mountain, he stepped in and followed behind Daoist Sunday. He did not give Di Yuanfeng and the sloppy man any face. Di Yuanfeng and the man carrying the luggage quickly looked at each other and smiled. This style was very similar to a wild cultivator. After being cautious, he became familiar with how to steer the rudder according to the wind. He should be a fellow Daoist. It's a good thing. The four of them sat together on the stone cliff. Daoist son smiled and asked, "Fellow Daoist also came for the abode in the mountain?" This black-robed old man who was wrapped in a green cloth probably believed that Sun Daozhong was the immortal master of the infant mountain register. After probing him 3 times, he no longer had any doubts. At this moment, he revealed a helpless expression and said frankly, "Of course. It's just that I didn't get the local government's map. After entering the mountain, I've been wandering around here for a long time. Otherwise, I would be hundreds of miles away in the deep mountains. If my luck was better, I would be able to find the abode with the abode's restriction broken." Daoist son looked at the noble young master Di Yuanfeng with the bamboo cane and straw shoes. The latter smiled slightly and took out a neatly folded map of the county. It was a copy. The map of the various regions had always been a taboo item in the imperial court of each country. It must not be leaked to outsiders. Di Yuanfeng and the other two could successfully copy it. Of course, it was because of Daoist son's identity. However, the county governor was not someone easy to deal with. He made Daoist son reveal his celestial spells and dozens of Daoist talisman that could be posted in the government office. The tall and skinny Daoist's talisman drawing was actually clumsy. He had only seen a few beginner talisman from the infant mountain and his drawing was 70 to 80% similar. The secret manual that he stole from the Daoist temple did not have any records of talisman. However, The old Daoist's talisman gallbladder did have a trace of spiritual energy. It could be used to resist the chi of evil that was not dense in the marketplace. Of course, those talisman would not be posted on the government office's door. Instead, it would be taken by the county governor to be sold to those local tyrants who were afraid of death and did not lack money. The black-robed old man expressed his gratitude and reached out to take the map. He looked at it carefully, as expected of Daoist's son, to be able to copy this item. The tall and skinny Daoist stroked his beard and smiled. He did not say anything. The sloppy man called himself Great Teacher Huang and continued to remain silent. The black-robed old man wanted to say something but stopped. Di Yuan Feng knew that this person had finally taken the bait. Unfortunately, whether it was him or Daoist's son, neither of them took the initiative to speak a word. The other party had to show some sincerity and capital. This black-robed old man who was in a dilemma was, of course, Chen Pinggan, who was wearing a mask. His face was old and he carried a long sword on his back. He looked dispirited and his eyes were cloudy. Chen Pinggan did not believe that he was the unofficial disciple of the Thunder God Residence's Daoist Jingming from the Infant Mountain. Otherwise, he would not have used such a shallow method to test the other party's authenticity. Since the Infant Mountain was an important mountain gate at the western estuary of the Great Blasphemy Continent, he knew about it before coming to the North Continent. Later on, he asked Qi Jinglong about the Thunder God Residence's talisman mission in detail. Although Qi Jinglong was from the Taihui sword sect, everyone in the continent knew that this land dragon talisman's realm was very high. Chen Pinggan even knew that the real key of the Thunder God Residence's Ancestral Hall's Thunder Technique 5 talismans was to seal the 5 ancestral seals, including Jade Mansion Governor, 5 inspectors, and Main Hall Leader. Not only that, Qi Jinglong also personally drew talismans and showed Chen Pinggan the 5 thunder techniques. Naturally, its power was not as good as the Thunder God Residence's Earth Immortals work. After all, it lacked the vital 5 Thunder Sect Dharma seals. However, Chen Pinggan believed that other than the 5 palm print masters, there was no other Ancestral Hall's direct disciple in the Infant Mountain who could compare with an outsider like Qi Jinglong. Comparisons were odious. Moreover, it was useless to be angry. The reason why he deliberately believed the other party's identity was that Chen Pinggan wanted to rely on the 3 of them to hide his identity, instead of searching for the cave alone. As for how to deal with the wild cultivators, Chen Pinggan had some experience in scheming against Liu Laocheng and Liu Zhimao after all. Although each continent had its own customs, a mountain cultivator was still a mountain cultivator after all. White wine was good for the face, while gold was bad for the heart. Traveling thousands of miles for wealth, profit was the most important thing. After carefully weighing the pros and cons, Chen Pinggan asked carefully, "I wonder if Daoist Sun needs another helper." After thinking about it, Daoist Sun pretended to nod and agree. He knew that Qin Juyuan would stop him. As expected, there was no need for the 2 of them to communicate telepathically. Di Yuan Feng asked, "Brother Chen, this is our first time meeting. If it were you, would you randomly have an unknown companion?" Chen Pinggan gritted his teeth and slowly took out a stack of yellow paper talisman from his sleeve. He sorted them out in order beside him. Other than the Heavenly Thunder talisman, there were also 2 Great River talismans and 2 Earth-picking talismans, as well as several mountain and water barrier-breaking talismans. They were all drawn with gold and silver powder. Compared to the 50 talismans sold in the above Cloud City, other than the fact that they were made of the most common yellow paper, the rest of the talismans were worlds apart in terms of brushwork, appearance, and power. The price could not be compared. There were many rules in talisman drawing. In terms of dipping the tip of the brush in ink, there were ordinary cinnabar, gold and silver powder, and immortal cinnabar. As for immortal cinnabar, it was a bottomless pit with a great disparity. Therefore, for chi refinement warriors who cultivated the talisman, drawing talismans was burning money. The more authentic the talisman was, the more immortal money it would consume. Fortunately, as long as a talisman cultivator reached a higher level, he could immediately earn money to support the mountain. However, for a talisman cultivator, it was too much of a test of one's aptitude. Whether one could succeed or not, one could tell whether one's future was good or bad from the first few strokes of the brush. Of course, nothing was absolute. There were also great talents who suddenly became enlightened late in life. However, they were usually unorthodox cultivators who had long been abandoned by the immortal families. These talisman that Chen Pingan took out were all yellow paper gold-threaded talismans made from gold ingots of the imperial family. Compared to the secular cinnabar and silver powder talisman, their quality and value were naturally better. Daoist Sun swept a glance at the talisman and then looked at the black-robed old man. This immortal master of the Thunder God residence only smiled without saying anything. Only then did Chen Pingan smile awkwardly. He took out the first talisman of Tian Bu drawn with cinnabar from the Spring Dew Garden Mountain and gently placed it on the ground. Di Yuanfeng smiled and asked, "Brother Chen, where did you buy these treasured talisman? They look quite good. I also want to buy some." The black-robed old man said rather proudly, "Although I'm not an immortal master of the imperial family, nor do I have a talisman master, I still have some aptitude in the talisman Dao." At this point, the old man immediately withdrew his proud expression and said resentfully, "Of course. In front of Daoist Sun, it's no different from a child's play in the countryside." Daoist Sun felt that the time was about right. He said indifferently, "Brother Chen, don't underestimate yourself. To be honest, although I've cultivated in the Infant Mountain for many years, Brother Chen should know that the Thunder God Residence's Taoists can be roughly divided into two types apart from the direct disciples of the five immortals. One is to focus on cultivating the five thunders Dharma, and the other is to study the talisman, hoping to be bestowed a secret method of the direct talisman from the ancestral hall. I'm the former. Therefore, if Brother Chen is really an expert proficient in the talisman, we're actually willing to invite you to visit the mountain." The sloppy man who called himself Master Huang said, "I wonder how powerful the talisman that Brother Chen painstakingly drew is?" Chen Pingan hesitated for a moment. He picked up a great river traversing talisman and formed a seal with one hand. He seemed to be chanting something, and after a moment, he threw it into the stream. With a light shout, his hands quickly formed seals, dazzling the eyes. The talisman melted as soon as it entered the stream, but the talisman glowed with spiritual light. In the stream, it shone brightly, like strands of intertwining fishing lines. The three of them saw the black-robed old man give a light shout. He no longer formed seals, but put two fingers together and shouted the word "rise." Then, with a light swipe, a flood dragon rushed out of the stream. After circling around Shawai'a, it returned to the stream where the old man's two fingers pointed. The old man obviously wanted to show off more of the talisman's demeanor, and indeed, he still had some strength left. The rank of the talisman was quite high. After this, there was still more. Because in the stream, more than half of the sparkling silk lines were still there. The black-robed old man raised his sleeves, and pillars of water rose from the ground. They rapidly revolved around Shawai'a and the other three people. For a moment, mist filled the air, and a chill seeped into their bones. Di Yuanfeng asked Master Huang telepathically. The latter used his martial arts ability to condense his voice into a line and replied, "He has some skills, but his killing power is weak. These tricks look powerful, but they're actually broken with a few punches. However, if this person can control all the talisman, it will be of great help. After all, we lack a cultivator who can attack from afar. Moreover, a talisman cultivator is most suitable to be in charge of breaking the barrier and opening the path." The black-robed old man withdrew the talisman's divine ability, and the stream returned to its calm state. There were no more talisman galls condensed from spiritual qi in the water. Chen Pingan looked around and sighed. If he was alone in that cavern, he might be able to find some clues if he pondered for a while. However, the place where Di Yuanfeng's palm was placed at the death gate of the 8 trigrams formation might have made his heart beat like a drum. However, this Daoist Sun was able to rely on the compass to calculate that it was indeed an auspicious place where life and death would change. This was why that young Master Qin didn't hesitate to punch. As for the matter of needing the water talisman, Chen Pingan didn't deliberately hide it. Without needing Di Yuanfeng's reminder, he had already flicked the talisman out of his sleeve. The other party must have already seen it. Even if he didn't care at the time, he must have started to think about it now. Chen Pinggan was simply reminding this young Master Qin of the Jiao country that his cultivation wasn't good, but his brain was still sharp. Therefore, he wanted to enter the Immortal's cavern. Even if it was a double cross, he should at least take action later. On the other side of the cavern, 2 young men and 2 old men stood side by side under the statue. One of the old men smiled and put away a talisman that appeared out of thin air. With a light shake, it turned into ashes. The scene of the 4 people successfully breaking the formation and their words were all taken in. If Chen Pinggan was present, he would be able to recognize the 3 people at once. The old man who bought the talisman from Cloud Above City and the young man and woman who were patrolling the streets of the market. They were the old Daoist master Huanyang and the 2 direct disciples of Cloud Above City Lord Shenzhenze. The woman was surprised and shocked. She asked curiously, "Daoist master Huan, you wanted us to leave the cavern first but left this talisman behind. Did you know that this group of wild cultivators could lead the way for us?" Huan Yun laughed. He didn't pretend to be an expert. He shook his head and said, when they approached the entrance of the cavern, the talisman along the way moved. "I just didn't want to get into a conflict with them. When we meet on a narrow path, there's no way to retreat. Do we have to fight and kill? What's more, although the young Marquis of the Baiting Kingdom and his men haven't left the pavilion yet, judging from their posture, they've already regarded this place as theirs. If we make a big commotion here, they'll rush over. At that time, there will be a 3-way battle, and more people will die. Your master sent the 2 of you down the mountain to train, not to send you to your deaths." Huan Yun walked to the dragon claw on the ground that had returned to normal. He sighed and said, "That's why it's said that on the path of Tao, taking a step back occasionally is just a few steps up the mountain." Huan Yun suddenly laughed and said, "Oh, you're indeed accompanied by 2 level 7 martial artists. 1 punch from each of you and you destroyed my 2 valuable roadside talisman. There must be an expert in the group. Normal martial artists wouldn't be able to detect the ripples. Or is that little girl actually an Earth Immortal of the Golden Core stage?" The woman saw that the old Daoist master was only squatting there and didn't move. She asked worriedly, "Why didn't you hurry and trigger the mechanism?" The old Dragon Gate Realm consecrator from above Cloud City said slowly, "If that group of wild cultivators who took the lead were waiting for you, think about it. If the 2 of you followed them recklessly, would you die with a single punch? Even if you didn't die, you would be injured. Wouldn't you still die?" The young man and woman looked at each other and felt a lingering fear. The old Daoist master hesitated and asked, "Daoist master Huan, can I destroy the entrance of the cavern?" Huan Yun smiled and said, "If you're not afraid that the other party won't have a way out and we won't be able to return after that, then we'll have to wait for our deaths in the mountains of gold and silver. Naturally, you can do it." The old Daoist master was speechless. He could only let it go. Huan Yun glanced at the man and woman from the corner of his eyes and sighed in his heart. The difference in temperament between the 2 was obvious. The woman was anxious while the man was calm. If this continued, it would be hard to say if they could still become Dao companions. 541. The 4 of them paused for a moment until Di Yuanfeng, who had his hand on the hilt of his saber, and Huang Shi looked at each other. Only then did they rush towards the Green Mountain. The place where they had landed previously had a large round green stone that resembled a Kasoon pattern. It was supposed to be above the interior of the Taoist temple. Who would have thought that someone would step on it in this immortal secret realm? In the center of this Kasoon was a lotus flower. Outside the circle were 2 dragons, and outside the circle were 16 flying heavens. There were many layers, dense and exquisite. Di Yuanfeng knocked on it many times with his bamboo cane. There was the sound of metal and stone. It was indestructible. However, even if they could move it away, Di Yuanfeng would not dare to act recklessly. After all, they still had to leave this immortal mansion ruins through this place. Just now, he and Huang Shi had pretended to stop, just in case. If someone had secretly followed them into this place, they would have suffered a knife and a punch from the 2 of them. Chen Pingan, who was at the back, secretly took out a Yang-Qi lantern lighting talisman. There was still no sign of evil spirit. Compared to the outside world, the talisman burned more slowly. It should be because the spiritual energy here was abundant. The other three just glanced at it and did not pursue it. Among the green mountains and clear waters, there was a white jade arch bridge. It was like a white rainbow lying on the water. On the bridge railings, there were carvings of all kinds of strange beasts. None of them were the same. They were ingenious, like sleeping creatures. Under the bridge, there was a large stone pier near the water surface. It was carved with one of the legendary dragon species. It had 2 horns on its head and dragon scales all over its body. It was sculpted to lie on the ground and look at the water. Chen Pingan fell into deep thought. The object under the bridge was not a rare sculpture of a strange beast. However, the name of this dragon species was very strange. In Haoran world, it was commonly known as Ba Xia or Baxia. However, in Lotus Blossom Blessed Land, Chen Pingan had seen this creature when he visited all the rivers and bridges in Nanyuan Kingdom. The only difference was that its style was slightly different from Haoran world. Moreover, according to the books that the imperial tutor Zhong Qiu had brought back from the Ministry of Works, the book that Chen Pingan had read the most, Construction Methods, recorded this creature as a water-repellent beast that could swallow river water. It was reared by the master of Jianghu in ancient times. According to legend, it was disliked by the god of fire, who used the method of boiling the lake and burning the sea to kill it. However, in the vast world, there were no such strange records. There were only vague records of one of the 9 sons of the dragon, and they were mostly the same. There was absolutely no such thing as the master of Jianghu. Chen Pingan suppressed the thoughts in his mind. He took out a sword chi bridge amulet and hesitated for a moment. In the end, he didn't pass it to Huang Shu and the others. Instead, he walked onto the bridge. There was no wind, no waves, no shock, no danger. Chen Pingan walked across the white jade bridge just like that. He looked back and waved his hand, indicating that there were no traps and that they could cross the bridge without worry. The other 3 had different thoughts. Daoist Sun thought that this fellow Daoist Chen was probably trying to show off since they were about to enter the treasure mountain. It was futile. This fellow Daoist would still die if he deserved it. He shouldn't have agreed to go along with them when they were at the cliff by the stream. He shouldn't have entered the ruins of this immortal mansion filled with treasures. Just thinking about it made the tall and skinny Daoist feel frightened. Could it be that he would also meet with misfortune? The young immortal master of archives left the mountain to experience the world. He was here to search for treasures and also to cultivate. As long as he didn't meet with an enemy sect, he would usually be harmonious. Even if he met with strangers by chance, he would reveal his identity. It would be a form of fate and friendship. However, most of the mountain cultivators were in groups of 3 or 4. If there were too few people, they wouldn't be able to do anything. If there were too many people, there would be trouble. If there was even the slightest disturbance, they might not be able to survive until the time when the spoils were unevenly divided. Fighting with the immortal master of archives for opportunities was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Therefore, in the process of fighting, they were often more willing to risk their lives than the former. Once they were in a desperate situation, the rogue cultivators would even unite against a common enemy and be reluctant to give up their capital. However, after the spoils were divided, what was so difficult about it? As a mountain cultivator, after the situation was settled, if he didn't have the thought of taking all the benefits for himself, what kind of rogue cultivator was he? Di Yuanfeng noticed that Daoist Sun's eyes were wandering. He smiled and said, "What's wrong? Are you worried that Master Huang and I will trap you? This is such a big and rare paradise. How much can the 3 of us take away in the end? Since we can't take it all away, do we still need you to kill me or I to kill you?" When Daoist Sun heard this, he felt that it was reasonable. He couldn't help but stroke his beard and smile. The 3 of them walked across the white jade bridge. While no one was paying attention, Daoist Sun squatted down and touched the white jade bridge. This wasn't the ordinary white jade of the secular world. Mother K, Wouldn't this be another sum of money lying here without moving? Daoist Sun bent his finger and tapped it lightly. The sound was crisp and pleasant to the ears. It was like the first time in his life that he heard the sound of two small coins gently tapping against each other. It was fascinating and could never be tired of hearing it. When Di Yuan Feng approached the mountain gate, he raised his head and looked at a flight of stairs that led to the summit. He smiled and said, "We'll take a small detour and look at the scenery. After confirming that there's no one around, we'll directly ascend to the summit." The other three had no objections. At the mountain gate, there was a simple and huge memorial arch. The words Heavenly Paradise were engraved in large and vigorous letters. The couplets on both sides were carved from stone. Silent and motionless, connected is God. Those who obtain beauty on earth are the most spiritual. Chen Pinggan stared at the couplets for a long time. In fact, it was not the least bit neat. However, the tone was big, the meaning was big. Huang Shi was the first to stop looking at the plaque and couplets. His gaze had long shifted to the distance and higher ground. Di Yuan Feng looked at the back of the memorial arch. There were 36 stone tablets of different heights on both sides. However, for some reason, the words carved on them had been smoothed out. It seemed that the only thing that could tell the later generations about the origin of this place was the 4 words Heavenly Paradise. As for the 2 couplets, they were even more inexplicable. Daoist Sun raised his head and looked at the ancient plaque. He clicked his tongue and said, "What kind of nonsense is this? It deserves to be destroyed." Throughout history, the Heavenly Paradise had undergone many changes. It was not always the same. Either it was destroyed by great cultivators, disappeared mysteriously, or fell to the ground and became a paradise. However, Daoist Sun believed that there was absolutely no such thing as a heavenly paradise. Moreover, although the spiritual energy here was abundant, there should still be some distance between it and the legendary heavenly paradise. This was because there were many similar records on the mountain. When the heavenly paradise was mentioned, it was usually related to the spiritual energy as thick as water. The water fate here was rich, but it was still very far from this saying. Compared to the 3 beside him, Chen Pinggan knew more about the heavenly paradise. However, he had also never heard of the heavenly paradise. As for deducing the age of the heavenly paradise based on the architectural style, it was also futile. After all, Chen Pinggan's understanding of the North Continent was still very shallow. Every time this happened, Chen Pinggan would have a deeper understanding of the immortal master of records who came from a sect. The heritage of a mountain indeed needed to be accumulated by generations of disciples of the Hall of Ancestral Masters. He could only memorize it first. If there was a chance, he would go back and sketch the main buildings. In the future, he would pass the drawing paper to Kui Dongshan to take a look. Di Yuan Feng retracted his gaze and nodded with a smile. "It is indeed strange." After that, the 4 of them hurried on their journey. Their footsteps were not slow. They passed by many grand halls, beautiful houses, pavilions, corridors, and vermilion railings. The 4 of them could see skeletons and corpses from time to time. Looking at the position of the corpses, they had all died suddenly. No one pushed the door open and entered. They still wanted to go to the Taoist temple on the mountain to investigate. Generally speaking, the treasures of a mountain gate would be at a high place. There were fine scratches everywhere in this unknown immortal residence, but they were not deep. It was as if a majestic storm of sword chi had come without warning. It came so suddenly that no one was prepared for it. This sword. It was undoubtedly the work of a sword immortal, but it was unknown whether it was a jade unpolished realm or an immortal realm sword cultivator. As for why there was such a strange sword attack, the sword chi covered the sky and earth. Moreover, it seemed to be able to accurately find a person to be the place where the sword landed. Chen Pinggan looked up. Only God knows. In short, such a huge immortal sect collapsed and dissipated in an instant. Along the way, they gradually climbed higher. It was deathly silent. Daoist Sun was nervous along the way, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. He had been subconsciously reaching out to touch the pagoda bell. If there were demons and ghosts hiding here, what should they do? Or perhaps, among these corpses, someone's soul condensed into a malicious ghost after death and occupied this immortal mansion for hundreds of years. Even if he was an idiot when he was alive, he should have cultivated an earth-immortal ghost, right? Therefore, Daoist's son had to touch the pagoda bell more to be at ease. In truth, the bell had other wonderful uses. The lower the realm of the filthy existence, the more rapid and dense the bell would ring. The higher the realm of the filthy existence, the higher the realm of the bell. When it reached the Dragon Gate realm, the bell would be so noisy that it would annoy the owner of the pendant. However, once the golden core demon was nearby, the bell would not shake violently. To an outsider, it would appear to be silent, but in truth, it would ring in the heart of the owner who refined it. It was the silent reminder of the pagoda bell that allowed Daoist's son to escape. Daoist's son only prayed that the bell would not ring in his heart lake this time. The three allies had discussed before. It was not a big problem to deal with a Dragon Gate realm cultivator, even if it was an immortal master with a Dharma treasure. Therefore, Daoist's son hoped that no matter how violently the pagoda bell at his waist shook, it would not be a problem. When the four of them passed by the corpses, Yuan Feng would wave his sleeve and the clothes on the corpses would be destroyed by his aura chi. Not only that, many of the cultivator's accessories that should have contained spiritual chi also could not escape the fate of being turned into ashes. Only the corpses remained unscathed when the aura of his fist brushed past them. It was another strange thing. After a dozen or so attacks, Yuan Feng did not gain anything. The tall and thin old man began to act first, imitating him. Unfortunately, his luck was not good and he still did not encounter a magical robe. Yuan Feng then turned his head to look at Huang Shi. "Brother Huang, why don't you try your luck?" Perhaps it was really feng shui, Huang Shi really did go up the stairs. After waving his arm, the clothes on the corpses were still intact. Daoist's son immediately ran over to take off the clothes. "To hell with the Thunder God Residence's expert demeanor. I am a mountain cultivator who has never touched a single grain rain coin in my life." However, after he succeeded, Daoist's son still reluctantly handed it over to Huang Shi. This was the rule of mountain cultivators. Of course, there was an even greater rule waiting for the four of them. However, it seemed that they were waiting for that fellow Daoist Chen alone. Daoist's son had a rare moment of reluctance. Could it be that he had to be kind for once and persuade Yuan Feng and Huang Shi? If everyone returned with a full load and was unable to empty the storehouse, there was no need to kill and rob, right? However, Daoist's son was somewhat hesitant. He felt that there was no hurry and that he should look at the harvest first before discussing anything else. Otherwise, if in the end they could not even fill 1 or 2 bags, his indecisiveness and soft-heartedness would only cause those two fellows to feel disgusted. They might even kill him as well. Chen Pinggan had been following behind the three of them all along. After reaching the last step of the stairs, on the white jade square in front of the temple, there were 2 smaller corpses on the ground. After Yuan Feng waved his sleeve, their clothes were completely gone, but each of them left behind a relic. However, the 2 treasures on the mountain had many cracks and were damaged. Yuan Feng crouched down and carefully kept them in his sleeve. Huang Shi said, "It seems that the spiritual treasures here are not too good." Yuan Feng nodded and smiled, "Then let's win with quantity." Daoist's son was overjoyed. Huang Shi also revealed a rare smile. Chen Pinggan still did not participate. He was still used to thinking of a way out first before talking about treasure hunting. Standing at the top of the mountain and looking into the distance, Chen Pinggan could see everything within 100 li apart from the green mountains and clear waters. However, there was a difference in distance. His vision gradually became blurry, but further away, there seemed to be an incomparably clear line. After crossing the line, everything changed abruptly and became foggy. It gave Chen Pinggan an oppressive feeling of emptiness at the end of the road. This was both a good and a bad thing. The good thing was that this immortal cave was a rumored rootless land. It was similar to the broken ancient paradise and was not built in a real mountain. This meant that this immortal ruin had a long history and had a deep origin. Perhaps there really were priceless heavenly treasures and one or two immortal secret manuals that could lead one to the Earth immortal realm. The bad thing was that it was easy to enter but difficult to leave, unless someone could break the restrictions of the small world. Chen Pingan had a sword immortal sheath behind him. Of course, he could do it. No matter how sturdy the sky was, it could not be compared to the Ghost Valley. However, by then, he would become the target of everyone. This was contrary to his original intention of secretly earning some money and leaving quietly without caring about me. Chen Pingan did not want to become the second Jiang Shangzhen and become a rat in the eyes of the North Continent cultivators. The reason why Huang Shi and the other two were so calm was probably because they had not noticed the phenomenon of the mountains and rivers in the distance. It could be seen that Huang Shi, a golden body realm cultivator, was not made of paper. However, he was not too strong either. The existence of that line did not mean much to Chen Pingan at the moment. However, if the worst-case scenario happened, he would be the only one who could see it and walk out of the small world. As for the other three, they were still in the dark. Perhaps they were secretly discussing how to take advantage of this fellow Daoist. The Daoist temple in front of them was not big. The plaque was gone. Before the four of them walked into the temple, they could not help but look at the green glazed roof. There were many buildings on the mountain, but this was the only place with such roof tiles. Time had passed, but the tiles were still shining. Obviously, they were not the ordinary glazed tiles in the palace of the mortal world. They were the real treasures of the mountain, used by the immortals. In short, every tile was worth immortal money. This scene made Daoist Sun tremble. He estimated that they were worth at least 7 or 8 small summer coins. If they were really made with the immortals' secret technique, it was possible to exchange the small summer coins for Guyu money. Huang Shi and Di Yuanfeng were purely martial artists. The value of these glazed tiles had never crossed paths with the sects on the mountain. Like Daoist Sun, they could not accurately estimate the value of these tiles. However, the immortal sects on the mountain had never covered their roofs with such glazed tiles. It was not rare to see such a thing in the mortal world below the mountain. Chen Pingan looked at the direction where the four of them came from. There was still no movement. If he had the chance, he would like to ask the next group of people a question. When did they enter this small world? Actually, Chen Pingan had been calculating the time. Once there was a significant difference between the speed of the river of time and the vast world, Chen Pingan would have two plans, the best and the worst. Baiting Country's young Marquis Zhongqing and the rest came to the entrance of the cave. The Golden Body Realm martial artist who was worshipped by the family was investigating the footprints on the ground. Fuyo Country's General Gao Ling said in a deep voice, "Young Marquis, there are many people hiding near the mountain." Zhongqing smiled and said, "They are just following behind us and eating our dust. Since they have the guts to enter the cave, they should have the guts to reincarnate." He did not have a good impression of the wild cultivators of the mountains and the immortal masters of the archives. Even if he himself was a serious cultivator, perhaps he was still a descendant of a rich family deep down. He was used to seeing emperors, generals, ministers, and marquises' mansions, so he was used to scheming and taking advantage of the situation instead of relying on a pair of fists and a few treasures to kill here and there. Therefore, Zhongqing was really tired of those high and mighty people of the same kind. However, if it really came to a situation where he needed to use spells to kill people, Zhongqing would naturally not hesitate. Bai joked, "Are you really not in a hurry at all? Aren't you afraid that those two groups of people will beat you to it?" Zhongqing smiled and said, "If they can refine the immortal treasures and eat the secret manuals in the blink of an eye, then I'll consider myself unlucky and admit defeat. Otherwise, where can people and things escape to?" Gao Ling looked at this person in a new light. Previously, he only thought of the Baiting Country's young Marquis as a good-for-nothing who had reincarnated. Now, it seemed that in the future, if anyone dared to underestimate this person, there would be a so-called battle of the great Tao on the path of cultivation. The other party would definitely fail miserably. The two Golden Body Realm martial artists opened the way and entered the dark cave with candles. Bai was in a relaxed mood. As long as there were no major accidents, there was no need for him to personally come to the mountain to search for treasures. Even if Sun Qing from the Sparrow Manor and Shenzhenze from the city above clouds came personally, it could only be considered a small accident. The 2 level 7 martial artists in his group were enough to deal with them. The group came to the cave with the 4 painted murals of the Heavenly Kings. Zhong Qing frowned slightly. She was not good at breaking formations. Her nascent soul realm master, as a wild cultivator of the mountains and lakes, had learned a variety of things. He should be familiar with it. However, he never taught Zhong Qing any ways to search for opportunities in secret realms. He always said that those unorthodox mechanism techniques would delay his cultivation. He would only talk about other things after Zhong Qing entered the Dragon Gate realm. Since the first group of wild cultivators and the cultivators from the city above clouds had disappeared, they must have entered the ruins of the immortal residence. Bai Bai smiled and said, "What do we do next? Are we just going to stand here and stare at each other?" Zhong Qing said helplessly, "If we know the location of the exit, we can just wait for it. I'm just afraid that we won't be able to discover it from 100 miles away." Bai Bai put his hands behind his back and looked around. "Let's look for clues first. If it doesn't work, you'll owe me a huge favor." Zhong Qing asked, "Is the price very big?" Bai Bai nodded and said, "It's not small. It will cost me 10 years of cultivation." This direct disciple of the water dragon sex ancestor carefully took out a natal item. It was an extremely rare green talisman. It was a talisman pattern of flowing water. It was simple yet strange. The water flow on the talisman flowed slowly. One could even vaguely hear the sound of flowing water. A golden core realm cultivator from a sect was willing to refine a talisman as his natal item. Then the grade of this talisman should be at least a magic treasure. Bai Bai said, "This is an ancient talisman. My master got it by accident in the early years. It came from the ruins of one of the 3 ancient temples of GBU. It's called the Inch Golden Talisman. It has many benefits. Cultivation of water arts is twice the result with half the effort." Because of the ownership of this talisman, there was some discord in the sect. Let's not talk about it. Anyway, one of its benefits is that it can help us enter the secret realm. The Inch Golden Talisman was also known as the Time Talisman. It was extremely mysterious. Although Zhong Qing did not know the origins of this talisman, she still shook her head and said, "Forget it." Bai Bai sighed. "I'm already an Earth Immortal. It's equivalent to 10 years of cultivation of a Dragon Gate Chi refinement warrior. What's the big deal? The further you go, the greater the difference of 1 level. It's the same for Chi refinement warriors and even more so for martial artists." Zhong Qing smiled bitterly and said, "Sister Bai." Bai Bai smiled and said, "Just call me Sister Bai. That's enough." Even for someone as cold as Zhong Qing, who was a descendant of a noble family, she could not help but want to reach out and hold her hand. However, Bai Bai shook her head and said calmly, "There are many women who are willing to die for you. Why aren't you touched? Just because I'm an Earth Immortal and lost a few years of my cultivation, you're moved? I don't think it's worth it to have such feelings. If in the future, a nascent soul female cultivator is willing to sacrifice so much for you, wouldn't you change your mind? A true immortal Tao companion on the mountain is not so shallow." Zhong Qing felt as if she was struck by lightning and was speechless. Suddenly, Bai Bai said, "Before using the Inch Golden Talisman, think about the clues and force your way in. We can't waste the fists of 2 golden body realm martial artists. If neither of them works, let me do it." Zhong Qing felt a little better. Looking at this beautiful Sister Bai again, she felt like a stranger. After Huan Yun appeared in the immortal cave abode, he immediately pasted a unique talisman on the 3 people beside him to hide their auras. As for the auras of the 3 people when they walked, Huan Yun was only an Earth Immortal of the Talisman sect and not a Daoist Heavenly Lord. He could not do it perfectly. The Dragon Gate Elder of the city above clouds heaved a sigh of relief. It was a good thing that they did not get ambushed. Huan Yun suddenly said, "You guys go on your own from now on. I won't care about the 3 of you other than fighting to the death. As for the gains and losses outside of life and death, it's up to fate." Then, Huan Yun smiled and said, "Don't worry, I won't fight with you. At most, I'll pick up the leftovers or those that you didn't find. Huan Yun's body dissipated. He was like a cloud and mist, without any trace of ripples. The elder smiled and said to the two juniors, "Perfected Huan always keeps his words. Let's go. What you need to worry about next is how to deal with those wild cultivators." Hearing the meaning behind the words of the Tao protector, the lady asked worriedly, "Martial uncle, you?" The elder said helplessly, "Do you need me to help you pick up and carry things? Are you here for sightseeing? Am I your martial uncle to be your porter?" The elder flew up with the wind. He wanted to see how high the ceiling of the cave abode was. Looking down from above, it was easier to see more hidden secrets. However, to be safe, the elder took out a spiritual weapon that was not his natal item. He flew into the air first to prevent himself from crashing into the mountain and river formation. Entering the ruins of an unowned immortal cave abode, there was naturally money to be picked up everywhere. There would also be killing intent waiting for those who picked up the money. Actually, the elder was both happy and worried. He was happy that the opportunity here was not small and was beyond imagination. It was definitely not a cultivation abode of a Dragon Gate cultivator, but an entire sect. Just looking at the scale of the buildings, it was not inferior to the city above clouds and the Sparrow Palace. Therefore, the city lord, Shenjanza, giving him the Fengsuan item was the right thing to do. He was worried that this immortal cave could not be taken away. If it was really the cultivation abode of a nascent soul earth immortal or even a great cultivator of the upper 5 realms, when they returned to the city above clouds, as long as the slightest bit of news was leaked, even a golden core cultivator would not be able to get anything when they came to search for treasures. They would only be moved away by the sect close to the water pavilion with the legendary ability to move mountains. The nearest sect to the baiting country was in the west and the other in the north. There was not much difference between them. The difference was completely negligible to the cultivators of the sects who owned their own ferries. The elder only hoped that the previous owner of this place was just a nameless earth immortal and that his realm was not higher. It would be best if he was a golden core cultivator. Nascent soul cultivators would be troublesome and it would be difficult to clean up after the matter. There might even be an immortal master from a sect who came to visit the city above clouds. The city lord could only hand over most of the fat meat and was worried that the other party would not be satisfied. Once it was the ruins of a mountain guarded by a cultivator of the upper 5 realms, there was no need to think about it. It was highly likely that fortune and misfortune came together. After a great fortune came a great disaster. Unless the city above clouds could immediately destroy this small world and destroy all traces in one go. Unfortunately, the city above clouds could not do it. Unless Shenjanza made a prompt decision and took the initiative to find one of the sects after the 3 of them returned to the city above clouds with Huan Yun and negotiated a fair share of the profits. As for this treasured land with rich water luck and so many ready-made magnificent buildings, it would naturally be a summer resort for the other sect in the future. The spirit tool used to scout the way flew in all directions without any hindrance. The elder then flew into the sky with the wind at ease. Just when the old consecrator was a few hundred feet above the ground, the spirit weapon shattered with a bang. The old consecrator knew that something was wrong and was suddenly pulled by someone, falling to the ground. The elder was shocked and then heaved a sigh of relief. It was the old perfected master Huan Yun who held his shoulder and brought him down to the ground. Then, the elder sensed a wisp of qi above his head. It flashed past and disappeared in an instant. Huan Yun said in a low voice, "I advise you not to go up anymore." Even a golden core earth immortal military cultivator could not withstand that wisp of sword qi. Previously, the old perfected master used a few patrol talismans and threw them in all directions. He realized that every time a talisman went to a higher place, it would turn into dust instantly. The old consecrator raised his head and looked over. That trace of aura from before had already disappeared. The Dragon Gate cultivator of the city above clouds was shocked. Could there be a sword immortal guarding this ruin? Huan Yun, who had secretly circled around the Green Mountain, shook his head. They are all dead. There are no living people or ghosts. Only this wisp of sword qi continues to exist in this small world. Huan Yun's expression was serious. Let me tell you another piece of mixed news. This place is a mysterious area left behind after an ancient blessed land was destroyed. The area is about 100 miles in radius. It is hard to say how old this small world is. It could be 1,000 years old or even older. However, I can roughly estimate when this cave residence on the mountain disappeared quietly. It was about 700 or 800 years ago. But this is not normal. In the history of Baiting country, there is no such immortal sect. Huan Yun stopped descending and was about 1,000 feet above the ground. He hovered in the air with the old consecrator and said slowly, "There is only one possibility. After the destruction of the sect here, this small world was brought along by an unknown expert and moved all the way to the Baiting kingdom. But for some reason, this immortal did not manage to occupy this secret realm and cultivate smoothly. Then, he used this place to establish a sect outside. Either he met with a mishap and carried a treasure of this small world which was not discovered by anyone and fell into the deep mountains of Baiting country. Or this person came to Baiting country and did not travel far. He hid here and cultivated in seclusion. Then, he quietly reincarnated." Huan Yun sighed. Life and death are uncertain. The great Tao is unpredictable. Every time he thought about this, he could not help but feel depressed. After a while, Huan Yun woke up. However, after Huan Yun sighed, he immediately woke up. He remembered what he had said to Shenzhenze in the city above the clouds and instantly returned to normal. There was no more haze in his heart. In Daoist cultivation, self-mistakes were the most harmful. This was why there was the most difficult heart-awakening stage among the three sects. The old immortal Huan Yun was actually very talented. It was just that all the earth immortals along the way felt that Huan Yun had a bright future on the talisman path and was compatible with his own great Tao. That was why he was so successful today. Actually, Huan Yun knew that this was called suffering in silence. There was once an expert who said that if he, Huan Yun, had entered the Zhong school of immortals early on and stopped learning those fancy scribbles, he would have been a nascent soul cultivator with a chance to enter the upper 5 realms. Therefore, Huan Yun was very emotional about the gains and losses. When he was really helpless, he could only treat it as a cultivation to train his Daoist heart to relieve his worries. In the Daoist temple at the peak of the mountain, there was a statue of a middle-aged Daoist in a sitting position. He looked forward and his hands were placed in front of him. There was a small brass incense burner on the incense table. There was still half a burner of incense left. Everyone knew that the small incense burner was definitely a Daoist treasure. However, no one dared to touch it. Di Yuanfeng asked softly, "Daoist Sun, have you seen this person in the book of Daoist statues?" Daoist Sun shook his head, "No." There was something he didn't dare to say out loud. The Taoist in front of him had an ordinary appearance. The whole statue gave people the feeling that it was nothing special. It was not even as shocking as the 4 heavenly king statues in the cavern. Chen Pinggan stared at the statue. It seemed that when he traveled with the old Daoist in the East Sea Temple for more than 300 years in the Lotus Flower Blessed Land, he would occasionally see the old Daoist in this sitting position. However, it was not common. Perhaps in the eyes of ordinary people, this sitting position was not strange. However, Chen Pinggan had a vague feeling. He felt that the true meaning of Daoist cultivation of the old Daoist was similar to that of the middle-aged Daoist statue in front of him. Chen Pinggan remembered 4 words in a Daoist scripture. Leaving the state of forgetfulness. Time flies. Cultivators do not know the winter and summer under the mountain. If a dead person leaves an empty statue, what can you do even if you have great Daoist skills when you were alive? You do not know the changes of the 4 seasons. How high will a Daoist reach in the end of his cultivation? Chen Pinggan sighed in his heart. He took out 3 shanshui incense sticks, lit them and inserted them into the small incense burner. Daoist Sun felt that this fellow Daoist was really wishful thinking. Could it be that he was still hoping that the Daoist statue still had some primordial spirit left? Just because he lit the 3 incense sticks, a lucky chance would come? Huang Shi and Di Yuanfeng did not stop him from lighting the incense sticks. In fact, They wanted to judge whether the small incense burner would trigger a trap or not through the black-robed old man's reckless act of burning incense sticks. Or maybe it would trigger a trap and bring about a fatal disaster. Because the small incense burner must be taken away. It was better if someone was willing to take the risk and explore the way. After the 3 incense sticks burned out, there was no movement. Di Yuanfeng smiled. Brother Huang got a Daoist robe and I got 2 ornaments. So who should this incense burner belong to? Daoist son or Brother Chen? Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "Forget about me. There are so many buildings in the mountain and I have not explored any of them. After we split up, I will be very busy. If Daoist son wants this incense burner, just take it." Huang Shi said, "I can use the Daoist robe to exchange for the incense burner." Daoist son felt his heart ache but he still nodded and agreed. Huang Shi threw the Daoist robe to him and put the incense burner into his bag. Then, he took out all the worthless clothes and bottles from the large bag and threw them on the ground. Then, he tore the bag in half and threw one half to Di Yuanfeng to use as a bag. Huang Shi glanced at the embarrassed Daoist son. Daoist son is wearing such a big Daoist robe. If you take it off, won't it be a bag? Daoist son was enlightened and was filled with joy. Then, the 4 of them busied themselves in the small Daoist temple. Di Yuanfeng found a snow-white praying mat and Daoist son tore off a few pieces of golden cloth made of unknown material. Huang Shi guessed that there was a secret hidden in the statue. So, he smashed the statue with a punch but he did not get anything. At that time, Chen Pinggan was squatting on the ground and touching the moist green bricks. Just as he was about to do something, he heard the commotion. He raised his head and looked at Huang Shi. The latter smiled at Chen Pinggan. Daoist son was shocked. Di Yuanfeng only glanced at the broken pieces of the statue. It was the most worthless painting and he did not look at it anymore. The 4 of them walked out of the Daoist temple. Just as Daoist son stepped over the door, a series of explosions sounded from the waist of the tall and thin Daoist. It was the pagoda bell that exploded. Daoist son wailed, "How tragic. It must be our disrespectful actions that have angered this Daoist immortal." Huang Shi and Di Yuanfeng looked at each other. Without any hesitation, they went down the mountain to the other buildings to search for treasures. Daoist son hesitated for a moment. He did not choose to follow Di Yuanfeng. Instead, he followed Huang Shi and shouted, "Wait for me." Soon, the small Daoist temple behind the 4 of them collapsed. Dust flew and covered the sky. Chen Pinggan did not rush down the mountain to search for treasures like the other 3. Instead, he started to pick up the items that the other 3 were not willing to take. For example, those heavy green glazed tiles that occupied a lot of space. There were also those green bricks that were condensed with dense water fate. Other than the bag on his body, Chen Pinggan still had the square-inch item and the foot-in-hand item. It just so happened that there was a lot of space for the Swan Ni shop that he opened on Springdew Gardens Laohui Street. However, what Chen Pinggan really wanted to collect was the broken pieces of the statue that Huang Shi destroyed with a punch. In the ruins of the Daoist temple, Chen Pinggan's movements were neither fast nor slow. Pieces of glittering glazed tiles were first collected into the foot-in-hand item. At the same time, he gently threw the debris in the ruins of the Daoist temple onto the square. He carefully picked up the broken pieces of the statue. As he searched for the broken pieces, he loaded them with the glazed tiles. It was said that the glazed tiles of the White Emperor City's glazed pavilion were made of a secret glazed tile. They were layered on top of the roof. It was said that the tiles of the glazed pavilion reflected the sea of clouds like blue waves. After collecting all the broken pieces of the statue, Chen Pinggan also loaded 120 glazed tiles. His thoughts were a little strange. When he looked up, it seemed that he had moved the ruins of the Daoist temple from its original location to the White Jade Square. Furthermore, those green bricks that contained strands of water fate and were not ordinary spiritual energy caused Chen Pinggan to fall into a dilemma. If he wanted to collect the glazed tiles of the Daoist temple and the green bricks on the ground, Chen Pinggan might not be able to do it even if he had a few more foot-in-hand item. However, Chen Pinggan did not have the slightest hesitation about this. Instead, among the foot-in-hand item, there were some worthless old objects. Compared to the green bricks that contained strands of water fate, or the other treasures that he would find in the halls and pavilions, the difference was like heaven and earth. Chen Pingan squatted down and covered his sleeves with his hands. Chen Pingan raised his head and touched the stubble on his chin. He stood up and moved as many green bricks and glazed tiles as he could. Among the foot-in-hand item, none of the old objects were lost. Finally, Chen Pingan lit 3 incense sticks and inserted them between 2 green bricks in the ruins of the Daoist temple. When the incense sticks burned out, he gently blew a breath of air and blew away some of the ashes. When Chen Pingan dug up the green bricks, he did it in a neat row. There were no scattered pieces, and he also wiped away the traces of digging on the ground. In the end, he did not even let go of the foot-in-hand item. Together with the foot-in-hand item, he filled more than 30 green bricks. After thinking for a while, Chen Pingan put another green brick and 2 glazed tiles into his slanted bag. It was heavy and made him feel at ease. Thus, Chen Pingan stuffed another 2 green bricks into his bag. Only then did he go down the mountain. He went to see the soft-hearted fellow Daoist Sunday. If there were no accidents, when fellow Daoist Sun found another treasure that even Master Huang coveted, it would be the time when fellow Daoist Sun died. Before fellow Daoist Sun shouted to Master Huang to wait for him, he actually told Chen Pingan in his mind, "Be careful of that Qin Juyuan. Fellow Daoist Sun better not appear again. Take this opportunity to pick up the treasure and run. The further the better. Life is worth more than money." Chen Pingan felt that with these words, there should be one less accident for fellow Daoist Sunday. The treasures obtained during this trip to the mountain had far exceeded Chen Pingan's imagination. It was the kind of treasure that could wake him up from his dreams with a smile. Therefore, what followed next was a trip through the mountains and rivers. It would be better if there were some unexpected gains. Even if there were no gains, it would not be bad. However, fellow Daoist Sun's pagoda bells shattered for no reason. It was very strange. However, compared to the strangeness of this cave, it was not strange at all. Even when Chen Pingan lit another Yang Qi lantern lighting talisman, there were still signs of heaven and earth being clear. There was no filth or evil aura. Chen Pingan was at his wits' end. It was just a matter of dealing with whatever came his way. Many natural disasters were actually just natural disasters. Chen Pingan went around the ruins of the Daoist temple on the White Jade Square. Chen Pingan was meticulous and skillful in his previous search. He would not have missed anything. If he really missed something, there was no need to think too much. Chen Pingan stood at the top of the stairs and looked up. Finally, the second group of people came. Compared to the first group of people who were sneaky, this group of people was much more ostentatious. It was the little Marquis of Baiting Country, Zhon Qing, and the female disciple of the Water Dragon sect, Bai Bai from Fuyo Country. Chen Pingan stuck a steely carrying talisman on himself and flew down like a bird. 542. Daoist Sun followed Huangshe to search for treasures. The two of them had a tacit understanding. They went their separate ways, but not to the extent of distancing themselves from each other. Daoist Sun was afraid of being too far away from Huangshe. If he were to encounter danger, he wouldn't be able to escape with his meager cultivation. On the other hand, Huangshe didn't want this tall and skinny Daoist to slip away after obtaining the treasures. Daoist Sun was in a 2-story building. Most of the books in the library had already been reduced to ashes. He found a Daoist book that couldn't be opened. It was still emitting a colorful glow. Even though it was wrapped in a Daoist robe, it still shone brightly. Daoist Sun couldn't recognize a single one of the golden ancient seal scripts. There was nothing he could do about it. Only an immortal master with the word clan would be qualified to come into contact with the long-lost ancient seal scripts. After meeting with Huangshe, Daoist Sun felt a little awkward. It was troublesome if the treasures were too good. Huangshe smiled and pretended not to see anything. Daoist Sun asked, "Brother Huang, did you obtain any treasures?" Huangshe nodded, "Not too bad." The two of them went their separate ways once more, looking for other treasures and immortal artifacts. Huang Shi was even later. He glanced at the back of the tall and skinny daoist and his smile deepened. Previously, Huang Shi saw two withered skeletons sitting opposite each other in a pavilion. There was a chessboard carved on the stone table. There were only 17 lines on the chessboard. The two of them were in the final stages of the game. Huang Shi wasn't interested in the game at all. However, seeing so many chess pieces placed on the chessboard, he knew that the two of them were close to victory. It was a pity that Huang Shi couldn't be bothered to look at the chessboard. In the small pavilion, not only did Huang Shi obtain 2 daoist robes, he also obtained 2 jars of chess pieces. The chess pieces had a natural arc. Huang Shi couldn't identify the material, but under the light, the white chess pieces shone with a faint golden color. Only the center of the black chess pieces was opaque. Under the light, it rippled with a jade-green halo. As long as one wasn't blind, one could tell how precious the chess pieces were. The 2 robes were still badly damaged, but the 2 jars of chess pieces were a blessing in disguise. They were like ordinary stones that had been soaked in the deep mountains for thousands of years, becoming more delicate and round. It was a delightful sight. When Huang Shi collected the black and white chess pieces from the stone chessboard, the white chess piece was scalding hot, causing Huang Shi's soul to feel as though it was being burned. The black chess piece was bone-chilling cold. After picking up the 2 black and white chess pieces and tossing them into the chess jar, Huang Shi discovered that there wasn't the slightest injury on his fingers. Huang Shi was pleasantly surprised. This chess jar was undoubtedly a magical artifact. When ordinary offensive spiritual artifacts were used by cultivators, they might be able to injure the physique of a golden body realm cultivator, but they wouldn't be able to injure Huang Shi's soul. However, this chess piece was something that Huang Shi was unwilling to hold onto for too long. From this, Huang Shi could conclude that the stone table that was able to hold the chessboard for thousands of years must be an immortal artifact. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the chessboard to remain undamaged for so long. However, Huang Shi didn't want to run around while carrying a stone table. Back then, Huang Shi wanted to destroy the stone table. If he couldn't obtain it, then no one else could. However, when he slammed his palm down, the stone table didn't budge at all. Not only that, it seemed to be a table that could withstand the force of his fist. This made Huang Shi feel even more regretful that he couldn't obtain the stone table. Otherwise, with the 2 chess jars, he would definitely be able to sell it for an astronomical price. At the pavilion, Chen Pinggan quietly appeared. Perhaps because the chess pieces had been rooted in the chessboard for too many years, they seemed to have seeped into the stone table. At this moment, faint golden and faint green ripples could still be seen on the chessboard. Chen Pinggan scanned the remaining spiritual energy of the chess pieces on the chessboard and closed his eyes, memorizing the chessboard in his mind. When he opened his eyes, he felt that a good memory was inferior to a lousy pen. Thus, he took out a pen and paper from his Fengtsuan object and recorded the ancient chessboard on the paper. There were 17 lines on the chessboard instead of the 19 that had been popular in the world for a long time. This in itself was a clue. In addition to that, many chess moves and life and death moves could also reveal the secrets of heaven. The martial artist Chen Pinggan didn't care about these clues at all. Although Chen Pinggan cared about it and put his heart into it, he was destined not to be like Lu Tai and Kui Dongshan, who could deduce the approximate age of the chessboard just by looking at it. Chen Pinggan was somewhat envious of the heaven and earth in the sleeve technique from the mountain. Together with the technique of mountain and river visualization in the palm, they were the divine abilities that Chen Pinggan wanted to learn the most. However, only earth immortals of nascent soul realm could barely master these 2 superior divine abilities. The only way to master them and reach perfection was to reach the upper 5 realms. Chen Pinggan felt that this pavilion was a very suitable place for cultivating energy. The 2 jars of chess pieces had accumulated a large amount of spiritual energy that didn't disperse after a long time, which was the essence of water. Moreover, it was far less eye-catching than the ruins of the Daoist temple that was paved with green bricks. This place was rich in spiritual energy and couldn't be missed. Chen Pinggan took off his bag and placed it on the table. Then, he took off the 100-eyed Daotai robe and put on the highest-grade golden necklace robe. Finally, He put on the snowflower robe that he got from the female ghost in Greasy Skin City. Finally, he put on the black robe again. In this way, with 3 robes on his body, he could use the robes to absorb and store more water chi. Chen Pingan leaped into the pavilion and sat down cross-legged. Relying on the steely carrying talisman, he restrained his breathing and remained as still as a mountain, trying his best to see the whereabouts of Huang Shi and Daoist Sunday. From the pavilion, the spiritual energy of the chessboard, which contained light gold and dark green, gathered at the top of the pavilion and slowly seeped into the robe. From this, one could see the purity of the spiritual energy on the chessboard. Under Chen Pingan's purposeful guidance, the golden necklace robe was the first to eat and drink to its fill. The spiritual energy of water that was attracted by the chess pieces and lingered in the pavilion for many years had also been absorbed. It was about the same level of spiritual energy as other halls. Chen Pingan hesitated for a moment and did not absorb all the spiritual energy in this place to prevent any clues from being exposed. If he did a good deed and took all the advantages, he would have to consider whether it was a blessing or a curse. After all, the various immortals would ascend the mountain one after another. Following that, there would be a series of scheming and scheming. This would be the true test. Luck was an item. If he could save some, he should save some. At the end of the day, earning less now was for the sake of earning more in the long run. Only when the overall situation was set could he talk about profit and loss. Chen Pingan then changed his strategy. He no longer kept an eye on Huang Shi and secretly followed Daoist Sunday. If Daoist Sun was wholeheartedly chasing after Huang Shi before obtaining the Daoist book, then even if Daoist Sun wanted to run away, Huang Shi would not let him succeed. As this mountain was not a true temple, the central axis was the white jade stairs that led all the way to the top of the mountain. It was more like an immortal sect without any obvious inclination towards the 3 religions and 100 schools of thought. What made Chen Pingan feel the strangest was that there was no ancestral hall on this mountain. Especially on the mountainside, there were scattered thatched nunneries and majestic halls and mansions. It was messy and without any order. After entering and exiting each building, Daoist Sun intentionally or unintentionally distanced himself from Huang Shi. Every time he passed by the vermilion railings of the winding corridors, he would not swagger. Instead, he would walk quickly and hide his body as much as possible. In the end, he hid in a small and exquisite secluded hall. The inscribed board fell to the ground and was in tatters. One could vaguely make out the 2 words Water Hall. Inside the hall, there was a statue of a female deity. Ribbons fluttered in the wind, giving off a mysterious feeling of ascension. Using his Daoist robe as a bag, Daoist Sun walked through the corridors, halls, and pavilions again and again. He gained a lot of things. As long as they had not turned into ashes, he put them in his bag and carried them on his back. Even the Daoist robe that he exchanged with the incense burner from Master Huang was used as a bag and carried on his shoulder. What a fruitful return. Of course, the prerequisite was that he could leave this immortal mansion alive. Daoist Sun closed the door to the hall. However, after a moment of contemplation, he recalled that none of the buildings he had passed by had their doors closed. Thus, he discreetly opened the door to the hall so as to prevent Huang Shi from noticing anything amiss. Chen Pingan, who was using the steely carrying talisman as a cover, was sitting on a roof. He was worried for Daoist Sunday. Isn't this the same as stealing the silver and inserting a wooden tablet to tell Huang Shi that Daoist Sun did not steal the money? Fellow Daoist Sun, in any case, you should at least run a bit more, open the doors of more palaces, pavilions, and houses, and pretend that you've crossed the central axis of the flight of stairs and fled in the direction of young Master Qin of Jiao country. Otherwise, if Huang Shi has a brain, he'll have to start his search from this small palace. If it was Chen Pingan, he would have to open or close those doors from the beginning. However, along the way, Daoist Sun often had to choose between the items in the big and small bags. In any case, the tall and thin Daoist did not know whether the new item was better or the old one was more valuable. In the end, it all depended on fate. Chen Pingan picked up the trash behind him. On the other hand, if there was not enough space in Huang Shi's bag, every time he changed the items he did not want, he would break them with a punch. If he could not break them, he would have other plans. Perhaps, he would have to change them again. Most of the treasures left behind by the immortals here were like this. Most of them were on the verge of breaking. Repairing them might require a large amount of money, but breaking them was a piece of cake for Huang Shi, who was a golden body realm cultivator. The items that he intended to discard were naturally kept by Huang Shi if they did not break with a single punch. This could be considered an alternative method of inspection. However, this trip to the mountain to search for treasures was a huge opportunity. Usually, when the immortals saw the light of day again, a group of mountain cultivators would fight to the death. After splitting the loot, if each person could obtain 2 or 3 immortal artifacts, it would be enough to make them go wild with joy. However, Huang Shi was still not satisfied. As expected, after suddenly losing track of Daoist Sun, Huang Shi began to give up on searching. He followed the path of the door and hurriedly found this small hall. When Huang Shi approached, Chen Pinggan no longer sat down. He lay down on the roof and held his breath. There was no sign of breathing at all. Huang Shi glanced at the plaque on the ground and smiled. Daoist Sun, there are more treasures in the water hall? Why don't I give you a hand? Don't worry, according to the rules we set, whoever opens the door first will have all the treasures in the house, no matter how valuable they are. In the water hall, Daoist Sun was trembling in fear. He silently prayed to the 3 pure ones of Taoism to ask Huang Shi to leave quickly. Probably because Daoist Sun was not a disciple of the 3 branches of Taoism, praying was useless. Huang Shi directly stepped over the door and smiled. Daoist Sun, what's wrong? You want to turn your back on us after obtaining some treasures? You even have to be wary of your allies. Don't we have to be wary of Di Yuan Feng, who is holding a magic saber? I'm just a 5th realm martial artist, why do you have to be so wary of me? Daoist Sun, who had nowhere to hide, could only walk out from behind the statue. He smiled bitterly. Brother Huang, you must be joking. Huang Shi joked, we've only walked through 20 to 30% of the Immortal Mansion's territory. There's still a long way to go. Let's not talk about other things. When we were at the Mountain Ridge Daoist Temple, we saw a beautiful scenery at the back of the mountain. Why did Daoist Sun lose the magic robe package so early? I know that it's not good to walk back after entering the temple to burn incense. Daoist Sun had no choice but to walk back the way he came. He picked up the package that he carefully placed on the ground behind the statue and carried it on his body. Sweat seeped out of his forehead. Brother Huang, why don't we work together to guard against that Di Yuan Feng? Wouldn't it be better if we hurt our relationship and let Di Yuan Feng reap the benefits? Huang Shi nodded. Can you let me have a look at the secret manual that exudes the brilliance of the Daoist robe? Daoist Sun sighed and said, Brother Huang, you've already gotten the incense burner. You should stop while you're ahead. Besides, this secret manual of mine is a Taoist classic. It's meaningless for Brother Huang to take it. Huang Shi smiled. It's not up to Daoist Sun to decide whether it's meaningful or not. Daoist Sun's face was gloomy. Huang Shi, then I have to give you a piece of advice. I'm a sea-viewing Daoist priest who's good at close combat. Huang Shi said, it would be troublesome if that's not the case. I know that your trump card is the broken pagoda bell. You used it for defense, but it's gone just like that. Other than that, it's nothing more than an offensive natal item. Do you know that I'm actually a 6th realm martial artist? Killing you in 2 or 3 punches will be as easy as taking something out of my pocket. Daoist Sun was shocked. 6th realm martial artist? Daoist Sun sneered. Who doesn't know how to scare people? If I say that I'm still a gold core earth immortal, are you afraid? Huang Shi was about to end this old Daoist's life with a punch when a series of footsteps came from outside the water hall. Huang Shi turned his head and saw that it was the black-robed old man, Daoist Chen, who didn't go to Di Yuanfeng's place to search for treasures. Huang Shi glanced at the guy's slanted bag. It seemed that it was filled with some glazed tiles and a few Daoist temple bricks. Was he too cowardly or was his luck too bad? He rushed all the way here and crashed into the gates of hell. Did he not gain anything else? If that was the case, Huang Shi felt that it would be a waste of energy to kill such a pitiful person with a punch. Daoist Sun saw that Daoist Chen had rushed over. He was both happy and helpless. Why didn't Daoist Chen listen to his advice? Well, since things had come to this, let's see if there's a chance for the two of them to work together to prevent Huang Shi from taking all the treasures that they had painstakingly searched for. After glancing at the guy's shabby slanted bag, Daoist Sun thought that if there was no other way, they could work together to escape and give Daoist Chen a few worthless treasures. Chen Pinggan wiped the sweat from his forehead. Just now, I was looking for you all the way, so I skimmed over the roof. I didn't expect to see two groups of people climbing the mountain. I quickly landed and saw two young disciples in one group. They looked like immortal masters that we can't afford to offend. They were all wearing Daoist robes. The second group was the young Marquis of Baiting Kingdom. There were 5 of them. One of them guarded the arch bridge at the foot of the mountain, while the other ran directly to the Daoist temple at the top of the mountain. It was obvious that they wanted to occupy the main road. The other 3 slowly climbed up the mountain. Sooner or later, they will bump into us. What should we do? Huang Shi's heart was heavy. There were 2 pure martial artists in the dilapidated pavilion at the side of the winding path. They were both true grandmasters. If he had to deal with the 2 of them alone, he would have to risk his life. Together with the other 3, Huang Shi did not think that he could escape with the treasures. Therefore, the situation had changed. He could not kill the 2 Taoists inside and outside the water hall for now. Huang Shi smiled. I was just joking with Daoist Sunday. Please don't take offense. Daoist Sun said angrily, Brother Huang, it's better not to make such hurtful jokes. Huang Shi was vaguely angry. He almost killed Daoist Sun with a punch. After all, a so-called wild Daoist who was good at close combat was far inferior to the black-robed old man who was proficient in long-range talisman attacks. If he killed Daoist Sun and handed all the treasures to the black-robed old man, Huang Shi did not believe that Daoist Chen would not be tempted. Daoist Sun suddenly said loudly, Daoist Chen, let's make a deal. Can you give me a few talisman? Chen Pinggan smiled, I can buy it. Daoist Sun was speechless. Huang Shi frowned. He almost forgot that Daoist Sun was also a half-baked Daoist cultivator. Although he could not draw talismans, it was not difficult for him to control the talisman. It was not a bad news. With Daoist Sun and the black-robed old man holding the talisman, working together with him, a golden body realm martial artist, and meeting with Di Yuan Feng, the 4 of them should not be underestimated. Huang Shi walked out of the doorway of the water hall and made way for the black-robed elder who had stopped in his tracks. He stood sideways and looked at the 2 Qi refinement warriors from the corner of his eyes. He smiled and said, whether or not we can grab hold of the opportunity in our hands will depend on whether we are willing to cooperate sincerely. I, Huang Shi, am a cultivator of the 6th level, and I am not lying. I will not hold back in the slightest once I engage in a battle with someone. However, as long as we leave this place, each of you will have to give me a fortuitous encounter in return. Chen Pinggan patted his bag. The outline of the green brick could be vaguely seen. He said straightforwardly, just take it. Huang Shi looked at him and his eyelids trembled. Daoist Sun gritted his teeth and said, apart from the Daoist book, Brother Huang can take whatever he wants from the 2 bag. Huang Shi hesitated for a moment and nodded, deal. Chen Pinggan stepped over the threshold and looked at Daoist Sunday. They did not need to communicate telepathically. They came to the back of the statue worshipped in the water hall. They squatted on the ground. Daoist Sun asked, how many types of talisman do you have? How many talismans? Chen Pinggan said, there are 3 types. Apart from the most precious thunder talisman, the talisman of 5 thunders, the talisman of flowing river, and the talisman of Earth Mountain. Daoist Sun, you can guess from the names that they are the most precious talismans. As for how many of them, Daoist Sun looked at him hesitating and became impatient. He said firmly, apart from the thunder talisman, you can keep it for yourself. I will take the rest. Daoist Sun still had a lot of confidence in Daoist Chen. As for the names of the talisman, one more domineering than the other, Daoist Chen, are you trying to fool a kid? Chen Pinggan asked, Daoist Sun, do you have so much immortal money? I lost half of it. The talismans that I got from the ruins of other immortal residences are not cheap. Daoist Sun was confused. Didn't you say that you drew the talisman yourself? Chen Pingan said, Daoist Sun also believes in this. If I could draw such talismans myself, why would I be a rogue cultivator at the foot of the mountain? I would have been worshipped by the top immortal residences like the Sparrow Mansion or the city above the clouds. I could just lie down and enjoy every day. Why would I go through all this trouble? Daoist Sun grimaced and rubbed his cheeks. Daoist Chen, tell me, how many talisman do you have? I will buy all of them. Chen Pingan shook his head. Daoist Sun, you are a senior, but business is business. You have to show me the immortal money first. These are precious life-saving talisman. Every time I sell one, my heart will tremble. Daoist Sun said angrily, Daoist Chen, you have to be honest. Chen Pingan did not back down. Daoist Sun, you have to be fair in business. Daoist Sun was a little discouraged. Damn it, this Daoist Chen was not easy to fool. Daoist Sun hesitated for a while, then opened the bag in his robe and spread it on the ground. He said earnestly, water and earth talismans, 3 of each. Sell me 6 of them. Then you can pick a priceless magic treasure on the mountain. Chen Pingan took out 2 talisman made of ordinary yellow paper from his sleeves. Then he twisted the talisman in one hand and moved it behind him. His other hand began to flip and pick. He said, 2 talisman in pairs. I will buy a broken immortal residence relic with Daoist Sunday. Daoist Sun's face was livid. He was about to roll up the bag. Only then did Chen Pingan put the 2 talisman at the foot of the bag and said, after I finish picking one, I will give Daoist Sun 2 more talisman. Daoist Sun finally gave up. Daoist Chen, I will suffer a great loss in such a transaction. Chen Pingan stared at the 20 or so celestial objects. His eyes wandered as he carefully sized them up. As he looked, he grumbled, Daoist Sun, since you're from the Thunder God's residence on the Infant Mountain, why didn't you bring a few thunder talismans down the mountain? Daoist Sun relied on the fact that you're the immortal master of the register and acted carelessly. Only now did Daoist Sun remember his identity as an immortal master. He stroked his beard and smiled. Traveling down the mountain, there are thousands of accidents. How can everything be calculated with one's fingers? If there really was no room for error, would there still be a need to go down the mountain to train one's Dao heart? Chen Pingan nodded and continued to pick. Chen Pingan saw 2 items at first glance. After rummaging through them, he saw another one. The first 2 items caught his eye the most. One of them was because he felt that it would be best to give it away. As for its quality, Chen Pingan did not care too much. He could give it to Li Huai. It was a wooden statue of a deity with the height of a palm. This statue depicted the figure of a Daoist progenitor. Her face was similar to the female statue in the water hall. Her figure was graceful, slender, and elegant. Her slender fingers were pinching a spell. Her expression was peaceful. She wore a crown on her head. Her robe was exquisite and delicate, like silk and satin in the human world. The hem of her robe hung down on the seat. There were 16 characters of seal script at the base of the robe. It was clear inside and not confused by external demons. Chen Pingan. There was also an antique small round fan. It looked very valuable. In the future, if he placed it in a shop on Lao Huai Street in the Spring Dew Garden, or in a shop on the Oxhorn Mountain, he might be able to meet a spendthrift. After all, the female cultivators in the world were not different from the women at the foot of the mountain. They were more willing to spend a lot of money than men. As long as they liked something, there was no need to talk about reason and quality. The last item was the one that surprised Chen Pingan the most. It was a pair of small bamboo cages that were pulled by golden threads. The color of the bamboo was green and lustrous. However, similar to the items here, there were fine cracks on them, which greatly damaged their appearance. The 2 small cages were the size of a fist. They looked like cricket cages in the market. They were inscribed with the words Fighting Dragon and Hidden Pan. Looking at them, Chen Pingan's forehead was sweating for the first time. He was a little nervous. He always felt that if there was a chance, he must travel Jianghu with Priest Sun, visit famous mountains and search for treasures. Daoist Sun felt that something was wrong. This was destined to be a profitable business. Why did fellow Daoist Chen look so awkward? Could it be that he suddenly realized the truth? No matter how valuable the items in his bag were, they were actually not as valuable as the talisman. One more talisman meant one more chance of survival. Beads of sweat appeared on Daoist Sun's forehead. He reached out and stealthily grabbed the 2 paper talismans, thinking, fellow Daoist Chen, considering how close we are, there are only 2 paper talismans left. Daoist Sun tucked the paper talismans into his sleeve and let out a sigh of relief. He was just about to say that there was no need for the remaining 2 paper talismans. Unexpectedly, Daoist Chen took the round fan and kept his promise. He took out 2 more water and earth talisman from his sleeve and handed them to Priest Sunday. After that, he took off the slanted bag and took out another folded bag from among the green bricks and green glazed tiles. He gently shook it open and put the round fan into the bag. Priest Sun was surprised and envious. Daoist Chen actually carried so many green cloth bags with him. He was very experienced. Chen Pingan took out 4 more talisman and put them on Priest Sun's robe on the ground. He then put the wood carving progenitor into the bag. Priest Sun was in a good mood. He smiled and said, Daoist Chen, do you want 4 more talisman? Take your time and pick the treasures on the ground. Chen Pingan hesitated and dilly-dallied. In the end, he took out a stack of more than 20 talisman from his sleeve. There were 3 golden talisman among them. It should be 3 golden talisman. Priest Sun looked at the stack of talisman in his hand and lowered his head to look at it. It should be the last talisman of Daoist Chen. Priest Sun swallowed a mouthful of saliva and warned himself to be calm. However, his smile was still stiff. He asked softly, Daoist Chen, is there something else you like? Good things come in pairs. I can buy 1 and get 1 free. You just need to give me a talisman of 4 attacks. Chen Pingan shook his head. Forget it. After selling 8 talisman, I only have a lot of talismans left. No. Priest Sun reminded, Daoist Chen, after leaving this place, don't you want to return to the Thunder God's residence on the Infant Mountain with me and become an immortal record master with backing? Chen Pingan shook his head and said, it's hard to say whether I have the chance to leave this place alive. Priest Sun was very regretful. He sighed and said, it seems that Daoist Chen's heart is not firm enough. Chen Pingan glanced at the bag on the ground and turned around. He should be taking out 4 talisman of attack to buy another item. Priest Sun reached out and grabbed his wrist. He smiled and said, Daoist Chen, I only want the 2 talisman of attack in your hands. If you want to buy something, you need to buy another one. If you want to enter my Thunder God's residence, you only need 2. How about it? The black-robed old man laughed and said, Priest Sun, you have good eyes. Priest Sun stroked his beard and smiled. Fair trade, fair trade. If you miss this village, there won't be a shop like this. Daoist Chen, you have to be very careful. You have to cherish this hard-won opportunity. The other party was hesitant. Outside the water hall, Master Huang, who had been waiting impatiently, reminded them, Brothers, are you planning to stay in this hall for a few days? In the end, the black-robed old man gave Priest Sun 2 golden talisman. However, only one was a thunder talisman and the other was a mountain and water barrier breaking talisman. However, Priest Sun knew when to stop. He only mocked Daoist Chen for being unkind. In the pile of talisman, there was only 1 golden talisman left. It should be the talisman that Daoist Chen kept for himself. However, Priest Sun did not insist. In any case, he should at least leave a life-saving talisman for the other party. However, in this way, Priest Sun was even more certain that this Daoist Chen who claimed to be from a small Daoist temple in the Wuling nation was not a Daoist cultivator who was proficient in talisman drawing. Chen Pingan took the pair of bamboo fish cages that Daoist Sun couldn't even guess the details of. Just when he was about to take another item, Daoist Sun had already put away the stall smilingly. 2 small bamboo cages, just 2 items. Without waiting for the other party to bargain, Priest Sun had already rolled up the bundle and slung it over his body. Chen Pingan turned around. When his back was facing Priest Sun, he first quietly kept the 3 items in his bag. Then, he put a few replaced glazed tiles and a green brick into the new bundle. He crossed the 2 bundles over his body. When the 2 of them crossed the threshold and walked out of the water hall, Master Huang's face was displeased. There are sounds of fighting on the other side of the stairs. I wonder who bumped into who. Currently, there were 3 groups of people mixed together on the mountain. The 4 of them should be the first to enter the mansion's secret realm. Huang Shi did not know who the second group of immortal masters were. They were most likely cultivators from the city above clouds. After all, there were only female cultivators in the Sparrow Mansion. The third group was the most troublesome. Therefore, the best-case scenario was that the 2 young immortal masters had a conflict with the young Marquis of the Baiting Nation. If Di Yuanfeng was the first to fight, it would not be a good thing. Based on Di Yuanfeng's character, if he was really in danger, he would definitely lead the trouble to Huang Shi. Once he was in a desperate situation, Di Yuanfeng's first thought would definitely be to drag the 3 of them down with him so that they could accompany him on the road to hell. Huang Shi suddenly leaped onto the roof ridge and saw that the Kasoon well was like dumplings in a pot. There were more than 40 people falling down continuously. It seemed that more people would fall down here soon. The commotion was huge, far greater than the intermittent fighting on the other side of the stairs. Huang Shi was a little perplexed. To him, the benefits of such a chaotic situation far outweighed the disadvantages. As long as he could find a way out and snatch the Daoist book from Daoist Sun, he could just leave. He was a pure martial artist. He had no desire for the spiritual energy of heaven and earth here. The rest of the people were killing each other like trapped beasts. It had nothing to do with him. Huang Shi said, "Let's not go up the stairs. We'll take a detour to the back of the mountain." Chen Pinggan asked, "Aren't we going to wait for Mr. Qin?" Daoist Sun sighed. He was really a Jianghu newbie who did not know how sinister people were. Daoist Sun could see that this Daoist friend of his was cautious and frivolous when he was doing business in the water hall. Huang Shi smiled and said, "Old brother Chen, you can go greet Mr. Qin. Daoist Sun and I will wait here." Daoist Sun saw that this Daoist friend of his was embarrassed and did not say anything else. Daoist Sun told him telepathically, "Daoist friend Chen, you must remember that the more you speak, the more likely you will make mistakes. Once you enter the mountains of gold and silver, you will obtain the treasures based on your own luck. Don't add any more unnecessary things. Who knows, Mr. Qin might have already obtained a great fortune over there. It's hard to say if he's still willing to meet you. If you go, won't you be making things difficult for him?" Chen Pinggan smiled and replied, as expected of Daoist Sunday. "You're experienced and steady in your actions." At that moment, Chen Pinggan's best plan was to find an outsider to confirm the speed of time flowing in this small world. After confirming that it would not delay his journey along the great path of blasphemy, he could stay here for a few days and strive to live in harmony with the other immortals. This would allow him to cultivate here steadily and store spiritual qi in the 2 aperture acupoints of the water mansion and the mountain temple. He would try to absorb as much of the essence of water as possible from the green bricks of the Daoist temple. The water hall and mountain shrine of the 3 realms had limited water storage. As for the other qi residences, due to the existence of the pure vital qi, they could not retain much spiritual energy. Even if they were added together, they would not be able to gather as much spiritual energy as the 100-eyed Daotai robe. However, even if the spiritual energy in the water hall and mountain shrine overflowed, it would not be a problem. Chen Pinggan could draw talismans here. Using the best immortal cinnabar from the Spring Dew Garden to draw talismans on golden talisman paper, the more spiritual energy consumed, the higher the rank of the talisman. Cultivating qi, studying talisman, earning immortal money, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Chen Pinggan even planned to use this spiritual energy to try to open up the 3rd key aperture acupoint to make room for the 3rd life item of the 5 elements in the future. This was because Chen Pinggan had an intuition that the wood-type natal item of the 5 elements had already been found. In fact, from another perspective, being in the small world was not entirely a bad thing for Chen Pinggan, who was in the North Continent. because this would cut off his connection with He Xiaoyong of the Qingliang sect. She followed him into the Skeleton Beach and the Ghost Valley. She went to the Jingguan city to keep an eye on him. After being implicated by him, she had to take the initiative to cut off the connection between them. She should have hidden in that small cave to avoid being trapped by Chen Pinggan again. It was the same reason. Therefore, all the gains and losses in the small world were Chen Pinggan's own business. This was actually a good thing. The worst-case scenario, of course, was that Chen Pinggan would break the restriction of heaven and earth with one sword and escape. Even without talking about the green glazed roof tiles and the green bricks on the ground of the Taoist temple, just the two small and exquisite bamboo fish cages surprised Chen Pinggan. It was very likely to be the Dragon King basket. Even if the two small bamboo cages were seriously damaged and of the lowest quality, it was still worth spending money to repair them and then use them to catch the flood dragon. Then, Taoist Sun's accident, should he continue to be unable to control it? Should he really give Taoist Sun 2 golden talisman, so that he could be at ease and have a clear conscience? Or should he simply get rid of the martial artist Huang Shu, who was the cause of the accident, in order to save effort and energy? Should he judge by his actions and not his intentions? Or should he judge by his intentions and not his actions? Or should he need both? Ji Yukan did not need to do so. Ma Kushuan did not need to do so. All the wild cultivators in the world may need to do so. As for Kui Dongshan, Lu Tai, Zhong Kue, and Qi Jinglong, they might have their own choices. Regardless of whether their choices were the same or different from Chen Pinggan's, they shouldn't be in a difficult position like Chen Pinggan's. When Chen Pinggan really embarked on the path of cultivation and became half a cultivator, he would discover all the principles that had supported him to this day. It would really make him feel like a burden. Just like when he was young and climbing the mountain, the big basket on his back already made him feel heavy even before it was filled with herbs. But the difficult part was that it was precisely these burdens that had brought him all the way to this day. Making things difficult for oneself was the difficulty of cultivating the Tao and climbing the mountain. At this moment, Taoist Sun told Chen Pinggan telepathically, "Fellow Daoist Chen Pinggan, be careful. This talisman Huang Shu has hidden his strength and is actually a sixth realm martial artist. Fellow Daoist, you don't have many offensive talisman left. This poor Daoist is good at fighting. When the time comes, just back off a little. But don't forget to hold the line for this poor Daoist. Don't be too stingy with your talisman. Don't injure him accidentally." Chen Pinggan was stunned for a moment. His mind suddenly became clear. He smiled and replied, "Taoist Sun, don't worry. To be honest, other than the Tao of Talisman, I'm also very good at fighting enemies." Taoist Sun said helplessly, "Fellow Daoist Chen, don't be like this. Hearing such big words from you, this poor Daoist won't feel relieved at all. It will only make my heart tremble." Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "Taoist Sun, you come from a high immortal family and your Tao is profound. Maybe you don't even need my help." Taoist Sun didn't say anything else. He thought to himself, "I don't feel any sense of accomplishment being flattered by a short-sighted guy like you." Huang Shu's intuition was sharp. He roughly guessed that the two of them were secretly communicating. But he didn't think that these two Daoist trash could talk about anything. How to die? How to hold each other's arms in front of the gates of hell? After Chen Pinggan understood some things, he felt that the sky was far, the mountains were far, and the scenery was amiable. But when he looked again, Chen Pinggan frowned. He shook his head, and the phenomenon disappeared. Chen Pinggan couldn't help but remind Taoist Sun, "Taoist Sun, be careful." Taoist Sun smiled and said, "Fellow Daoist, don't talk nonsense." On the other side of the stairs, it was indeed a conflict between Di Yuanfeng and the two immortal masters of the city above clouds. The two young man and woman of the city above clouds inadvertently found an ancient immortal's place of cultivation. Then, by chance, they opened a mechanism from a book. They actually found the remains of a golden branch and jade leaf, glittering like a treasure. For such a scene to exist for hundreds of years or even thousands of years without weakening, it must be a nascent soul earth immortal, or it must have obtained a shocking fortune that belonged to the remains of those legendary cultivators at the pure jade realm. As for the even more unbelievable remains of the immortal realm, they wouldn't turn into bones and dissipate flesh and blood. The robe on the remains was almost perfect and flawless. It didn't look damaged at all. Originally, Di Yuanfeng secretly tailed the two inexperienced young cultivators. He didn't have much hope. He didn't expect to see a big door. Whether the remains were precious or not could be seen from the appearance of the robe. Moreover, one of the young male cultivators even kept the remains and the robe in a white jade pen that was surrounded by white mist. It was obviously a legendary item. There was no doubt that it was an immortal realm item. Di Yuanfeng measured the opponent's cultivation and felt that there was an opportunity. He hid at the exit and waited for an opportunity. He planned to kill the opponent in one strike and seize the treasure before fleeing. A pen, a immortal realm item, the remains of the immortal realm, and the robe. These were three precious treasures. Unexpectedly, the young male cultivator's daoist robe was damaged and his body was seriously injured, but he was still able to protect the brush. Di Yuanfeng wanted to take advantage of the situation and kill the panicked and useless female cultivator. However, an old cultivator appeared out of nowhere. Not only did he repel Di Yuanfeng, but he also almost left Di Yuanfeng in the cottage where the immortal died. Di Yuanfeng relied on the ancestral blade to break open a spell cage and escaped with injuries. He cursed in his heart. That King immortal master of the archives actually wore two robes. The young male cultivator's face was pale. He stretched out his hand and wiped it. His palm was full of blood. If he hadn't been careful and wore two robes, he would have died without a doubt. The female cultivator felt her heart ache. She hated that treacherous villain even more. She didn't care about her own safety and wanted to chase after him. The other party was heavily injured. She might be able to beat him when he was down. The old Dragon Gate consecrator said indifferently, "Don't chase after a cornered enemy. Moreover, you have obtained such a great opportunity. You should know when to stop. What you should consider next is how to leave this place. The young Marquis of Baiting Country has already arranged a martial arts grandmaster at the foot of the mountain and at the peak to guard the exit. You can discuss among yourselves." Then, the old consecrator's figure disappeared. The young man and woman of Cloud Above City who had survived the disaster felt emotional. Therefore, they didn't notice the struggle in the old consecrator's eyes. If it wasn't for the fact that there was an extra Daoist protector, the old Daoist Huan Yun, who had been the chief consecrator of the city above clouds for almost 100 years, he would have let these two young juniors who were carrying precious treasures know what it meant to be unpredictable. Not far away, an old perfected one who used a talisman to hide his figure and chi movement had a complicated expression on his face. He seemed to be glad that the Dragon Gate Realm's consecrator did not make a move. He also seemed a little disappointed. Huan Yun muttered, "Cultivation isn't easy. It's even harder to cultivate the heart." After sighing in his heart, the old perfected master's figure disappeared again. Previously, there were some treasures and opportunities that had fallen into his eyes but he didn't take them. Now, Huan Yun could reach out and take them. This was because these two Shinzhenza's direct disciples were no longer in the mood to search for treasures. Instead, they were thinking of how to get out of this predicament. As for the Dragon Gate consecrator, he should have similar thoughts and plans. Other than the immortal artifacts in the halls and pavilions, Huan Yun wanted to take a look at the mountain-headed Daoist temple. The glazed tiles that he saw from afar were more precious than anything else. However, he wasn't in a hurry to get them. With the Baiting Country's Golden Body Realm martial artist guarding the mountain peak, this old perfected master wouldn't snatch them away unless he had no other choice. Di Yuanfeng, who was carrying a bag, hid behind a fake mountain. After swallowing an elixir, he panted heavily. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth as he cursed in his heart. Since he still had the energy to curse, it meant that he hadn't hurt his foundation. Di Yuanfeng didn't regret snatching the treasures. Since his attack didn't succeed, he didn't have the intention to continue fighting. On the steps halfway up the mountain, little Marquis Zhong Qing held a folding fan and gently fanned it. The Water Dragon sect's Golden Core Realm female cultivator, Bai, stood at the side. The Fuyo country's general, Gao Ling, stood at the foot of the mountain at the end of the White Jade Bridge. The consecrator of Zhong Qing's House of Marquis went to the top of the mountain. The remaining Fuyo country's imperial consecrator who came with Bai went to search for treasures after receiving Bai's approval. Zhong Qing looked at the strange phenomenon in the distance and frowned. How did so many people get in? Did someone break the cave's restriction? Bai sighed and said, "This place itself is the biggest problem. I'll go around the mountain and see if I can send a flying sword message to the sect." Zhong Qing stood up and said, "I'll go with you." Bai shook his head and said, "Go to the foot of the mountain. Gao Ling knows what's important and will definitely protect your safety. Don't rush to the top of the mountain. There are too many variables there. I won't be able to rest easy and explore the borders of this place." Bai rose into the sky and turned into a rainbow. Zhong Qing was fascinated. This was the elegance of a Golden Core Realm Earth Immortal. Zhong Qing slowly descended the mountain. A Golden Body Realm martial artist, Gao Ling, might not be able to stop all the treasure hunters. However, as long as the guests who were rushing to the top of the mountain didn't have the ability to gather together, they would be like a plate of loose sand, allowing Zhong Qing to do whatever she wanted. After entering the secret realm and discussing with Sister Bai, Zhong Qing changed her mind. Therefore, Zhong Qing didn't plan to start a massacre. Instead, she planned to make a deal with those cultivators and martial artists who crossed the border. They could go up the mountain, but when they went down the mountain, they had to meet with Zhong Qing in private and hand over one of the mountain artifacts that she took a fancy to. One was enough. As for the other items that were carried by the lucky ones, Sister Bai would of course silently record them and hand them over to the Water Dragon sect's ancestral hall so that those Earth Immortal cultivators could capture these ants one by one and take back the treasures. In this way, Zhong Qing didn't have to kill anyone personally. Harmony breeds wealth. At the moment, it could save a lot of trouble and accidents. Mountain cultivators, unless they felt that they were in a situation of certain death, were generally very afraid of death and cherished their lives. Everything was negotiable. On the contrary, those mountain sect's immortal masters who didn't rely on either side couldn't see the situation clearly. His nascent soul master, who was a wild cultivator, was now a nominal consecrator of the Water Dragon sect. Sister Bai was his future immortal Tao companion. No matter how one looked at it, they were family. Therefore, this immortal mansion ruins were in the bag of the Water Dragon sect. Before this, Sister Bai had discussed with him that they would try their best to pick up a few precious treasures, and try their best to ensure that there were no more than 5 treasures. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to explain it to the sect. Moreover, Zhong Qing and her must be very secretive when picking up the treasures. During this period, the two of them must not touch the treasures that even nascent soul cultivators dreamed of. Otherwise, the several ancestors of a sect were not easy to deal with. Once they heard the news in the future and successfully occupied this place, they would certainly not miss anyone who entered the realm. When they got to the bottom of the matter, they would use endless methods and often work on the cultivator's soul. At that time, as long as Zhong Qing was tracked down and exposed, she, Bai, would also be blamed. She would be labeled as a traitor by the ancestral hall, and the gains would not make up for the losses. However, with 3 to 4 treasures, the two of them were the greatest contributors to the expansion of the sect. Even if the ancestral hall found out about it, with the face of her teacher and Zhong Qing's master, the dozen or so great cultivators who had the qualifications to set up seats in the ancestral hall would turn a blind eye to it. Any immortal record master on the mountain would be protected by rules and resources, but they would also be bound by rules and commandments. When Zhong Qing arrived at the foot of the mountain, she amiably instructed Gao Ling, a Golden Body Realm martial artist who had just been promoted to a primary 3rd-grade martial general, had no objections. On the day he escorted the female cultivator, Bai, back to the capital, the imperial edict arrived at Gao Ling's general mansion. Therefore, Gao Ling knew one thing. In the Fufu Kingdom, where military merits were as difficult as ascending to the heavens, Establishing a relationship with the water dragon sect was more useful than anything else. Zhongqing stood at one end of the white jade arch bridge, gently tapping the strange beast on the bridge with her folding fan. She was elegant and graceful, her white robes flowing elegantly. Gao Ling loudly informed the people near the arch bridge of the rules that they should abide by. Of course, no one was convinced. Some people didn't dare to force their way through, so they wanted to leap over the dark green river that was like a moat. In the end, Gao Ling swept over and blocked their way with a punch, killing them on the spot. The cultivator's corpse was shattered into 7 or 8 pieces. Gao Ling didn't hold back much in this punch. Therefore, there were cultivators who exclaimed that he was a Golden Body Realm martial artist, as well as the great name of the #1 martial artist in the Fufu Kingdom, Gao Ling. After the punch, the clamor on the other side of the river immediately quieted down, leaving only whispers in 2s and 3s. It was unknown who or where, but they must have used a celestial secret technique. A hoarse voice shouted with the ripples of the Heart Lake, "We have the advantage in numbers. Let's work together to kill these two. When the time comes, we'll go up the mountains separately and take our own treasures." Wouldn't that be better? Why do we have to look at other people's expressions? If our luck is average and we can only take one treasure, don't tell me we have to offer it up with both hands and give it to this baiting country's profligate son for free. If we don't work together now, when the time comes to descend the mountain, it will be even harder to unite as a fortress, right? Many people were tempted by these words. 2 female cultivators of the Sparrow Mansion who had cast a camouflage spell looked at each other and smiled. The person who said these bewitching words was one of the direct disciples of the ancestral Master Hall who was their Tao protector. She was young but had a good temperament. They were the Sparrow Mansion's mansion master, Sun Qing, and the ancestral master of the ancestral Master Hall, Wu Jiong. Originally, Wu Jiong alone was enough to be their Tao protector. However, Sun Qing felt that it was very boring to stay on the mountain top of the Sparrow Mansion, so she came along to relax. She didn't expect to hit the jackpot while relaxing. Wu Jiong secretly communicated with the young mansion master. Could that young earth immortal be the Fufu Kingdom's bye-bye? Sun Qing sneered and said, so what if he's the direct disciple of the Water Dragon sect? In a chaotic battle, if he's not shrewd enough and weak enough, his death will be in vain. After saying this, Sun Qing said with a calm expression, "It's the same for you and me." Wu Jiong said worriedly, however, the mountains and rivers on the other side of the caverns suddenly became chaotic, and the restrictions were opened. There are entrances to secret realms everywhere. Isn't this too much of a coincidence? Sun Qing glanced at the sky and said slowly, since we're here, let's just take things as they come. Wu Jiong sighed and looked at the calm young mansion master beside her. It was no wonder that she was the youngest Golden Core mansion master in the history of the Sparrow Mansion, while she was just the ancestral master of discipline who had reached the end of the line year after year. On their side of the shore, there was an uproar. Everyone was shouting to kill. They said that they wanted to kill the general of the Fufu Kingdom and skin the young marquis of the Baiting Kingdom. In the end, Zhongqing smiled brightly. She opened her folding fan and gently fanned it in front of her. She only said one sentence, "You can kill me, but first come first serve." Sun Qing smiled and elbowed Wu Jiong lightly. "You go first. Otherwise, both sides will fight for 100 years. Wu Jiong understood. Wu Jiong, who was wearing a hedgerow on her head and concealing her appearance, strode out of the group and took the lead to walk onto the white jade arch bridge. Her footsteps were not fast at first. This time, she wore 2 sets of robes. The inner one was the first-class robe of the Sparrow Mansion, while the outer one was the robe that she had asked someone to buy from the city above clouds at a high price. However, the outer robe of the city above clouds had a small concealment spell cast on it. Otherwise, it would be too obvious and others would be treated as fools. In fact, the 2 direct disciples of the city above clouds, Shenzhenze, did the same. They changed their robes on the inside and outside. Their own robes were on the outside and the Sparrow Mansion's robes were on the outside. Wu Jiong walked slowly previously. Some of the people on the other side of the arch bridge moved, but they walked even slower. They were afraid that they would be tricked by this woman of unknown origins. They ran too fast and became the first bird to stick their heads out. Gao Ling punched them until their flesh and blood scattered. However, after that, all the wild cultivators, immortal masters, and martial artists of the Jianghu felt as if they were relieved of a heavy burden. Their moods instantly surged and they no longer had too many doubts. Because the woman actually walked faster and faster. In the end, she directly flew over and used an immortal attack spell. Then, she took 2 of Gao Ling's punches. One punch broke the spell, and the other killed. The female cultivator was beaten like a kite with a broken string and fell back to the other side of the arch bridge. The woman was really unyielding. After struggling to get up, she didn't say a word and actually walked towards the bridge again. With someone really taking the lead, the rest of the people no longer hesitated. They began to shout and roar as they crossed the bridge one after another. Zhong Qing flew into a rage. She hated the woman who took the lead to her death. Without any hesitation, she turned her head and pinched her fingers, blowing a whistle that resounded through the clouds. The 7th realm martial artist that was worshipped by the clan at the peak of the mountain flew down the mountain. He charged forward and jumped high from the white jade square, landing heavily on the stairs that led up the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, there were already some sharp-eyed people who saw this scene. They trembled with fear and the momentum of their attacks weakened. Unexpectedly, a horsewoman's voice rang out heavily. "First I killed the 2 by the bridge. So what if one more comes? One move from each person and there'll still be a pile of meat pace." At the foot of the mountain, a chaotic battle had already begun. In the distance, Bai Bai hovered on the edge of a boundary. Beyond a line, there was boundless white fog. No matter how she used her magic, she couldn't see the scenery beyond that line. She slowly descended and drove the stone into the white fog. Like a clay ox entering the sea, there was no news of her. Then, she tore a large piece of the ground and crashed into the fog. Still, there was no movement. This was even more terrifying than the mountain and river restriction. The thing in front of her was called Unknown. In the history of the Water Dragon sect, there was a pure Jade Realm ancestor and a nascent soul great cultivator who died one after another in the secret realm. After that, the sect couldn't even find their bones. Bai Bai was deeply worried. She should think of a way out. The ruins of this immortal abode, which had originally been seen as a shallow pond, definitely had a powerful origin. The Desolation River that traversed the central part of the North Continent was the foundation of the Water Dragon sect. The most important ancestral hall was one of the 3 ancient Desolation temples. As for the other 2, one was occupied by the Great Yuan dynasty and was regarded as an authentic Desolation temple. It was still flourishing with incense. The other was occupied by a destroyed sect for many years and was also built into an ancestral hall. However, it was destroyed in a battle with a sword cultivator sect. The atmosphere here was somewhat similar to that of her ancestral hall. This was also the reason why Bai Bai had the confidence to let Zhong Qing take the 4 Dharma treasures. If it really was the ruins of an ancient Desolation temple, her and Zhong Qing's contribution to opening the door would be too great. But for some reason, Bai Bai was worried. She was afraid of the worst outcome. Wasn't it just that they couldn't find a way out? Because if she and Zhong Qing disappeared for too long, the Water Dragon sect would follow the clues and come looking for them. What Bai Bai was really worried about was that this place would become a new burial ground for everyone. Just think about it. What if those seemingly orderly skeletons were also the corpses of newcomers and not the old members of the immortal abode? This meant that this place was actually a huge trap waiting for outsiders to come in and die. They thought that they were blessed by the heavens and that everyone who saw it would have a share. Of course, this was just in case. But Bai Bai was anxious. He felt that this in case seemed to have become 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 100 as time passed. For a moment, Bai Bai's state of mind was in a mess. He didn't dare to stay at the border of the small world. He quickly rode the wind and returned to the Green Mountain to find Zhong Qing and try to discuss a foolproof plan. After Bai Bai's figure disappeared, a tall old man with an ethereal figure walked out of the white fog. He smiled and said, 3 golden core cultivators, 2 golden body cultivators. There's also a little guy who's a little strange. It's enough for a full meal. A wisp of sword chi descended from the sky and pierced through the old man's head. The old man's ethereal figure gathered elsewhere. He smiled and said, "How many years have we been neighbors? You still have such a bad temper. Can't you change it? With those damned layers of restrictions, I can't refine this mountain and this water. But outside, there are layers of mountains and mountain roots that wrap around this small world. Little guy, you've been targeting me for so many years, but you can only barely protect this place from being lost. What can you do to me?" The old man's head was pierced through by the wisp of sword chi again, but he still appeared elsewhere. He said with a calm expression, "According to the old rules, only one person will be left each time. I'll let him die a little later and let him talk to me about the recent situation outside. At that time, he'll know how ingenious this trap is. Those treasures, where are you going to take them? There's food on the plate, food in the stomach, and a blessed place to be buried. This group of children's luck can be considered not bad. It's just a pity for a Daoist temple. That little boy with a sword on his back really has good eyesight. But I can't let you take those things away. How many times has it been since I was implicated and had to piece them together again? Piecing them together and moving them again. It's really tiring." The old man's figure was once again torn apart by the entangling sword chi. After his figure gathered, he stepped back and his tall figure gradually disappeared into the clouds. He reached out his hand and patted his abdomen. He laughed happily. "Haha, what a great world, what a unique world in my stomach. Which world doesn't have people killing the most? It's really boring." After the old man's trace disappeared, the wisp of sword chi still patrolled nearby for a long time. It swept across the ground and flew in circles. In the end, it went straight into the clouds and returned to the sky. Chen Pingan suddenly turned his head and looked into the distance. He was probably the only one who noticed the wisp of sword chi landing and flying. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.